Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the second day of talks that opened the Faber Web3 Hackathon. It was great to have you yesterday at our sessions. Yesterday we talked about some amazing things. So we had talks on the fundamentals of IPFS and Filecoin. We went deep into content distribution networks and how they can be built on top of a fully distributed architecture. We've also discussed where NFTs matter outside of the most obvious choices today. That was a very interesting conversation as well. And we were inspired by a panel of past hackathon winners who discussed their projects, how they won their hackathons, and gave some tips on how to be successful in this hackathon. We also had a session that I think was very important on team formation. So we have created a table where if you're looking for a team, or if you're a project, or if you have a project and you're looking for team members, you can register there, and then you can look at people who are looking for teams, and that will help you set up your team. We have the links for that on DevPost, but we'll also post it on the chat here in a minute. I urge you to register there, register your skills, and that will help you find a team. It was a really extraordinary day yesterday, and I'm super excited about today as well. Today we'll be discussing a number of things. So we'll have a panel. We're kind of right from the start. We'll start with a live coding session with an example project of something that you could actually build during the hackathon. We'll talk also about DeFi. We're going to go over some of the fundamentals of DeFi, look at the space, and also understand how you can start building within the DeFi framework and how you can build new projects from scratch on DeFi. We'll talk about, and this is a session that's going to be for all of those coming from Web 2, trying to enter the Web3 space. We're going to be talking and we'll have some examples of people who did that kind of took that career path, started in Web 2 and are now working in Web 3 with the help of one person from HR from Protocol Labs. We'll also look at what companies are looking for when they're hiring Web3 developers and how you can make that jump. So that's going to be really interesting. And then we'll talk about how to write a good accelerator pitch or a good investment pitch. Some of you are here just to experiment and have fun. I'm sure some of you will want to create projects that might become businesses or might need money to move forward. So if you do, you certainly don't want to miss that session. So just before we dive into the first session of today, I just wanted to recap something very important from yesterday that was also mentioned from past hackathon winners. Don't forget that you're here to have fun, to learn. So be bold in the projects that you decide to endeavor. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. This is the right place to do it. You really have nothing to lose, and there are plenty of awards to win. So kind of go for it, and don't be afraid to kind of try to build bold ideas. We're here to help you on that journey. Protocol Labs is here to help you on that journey as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing what projects come out of this hackathon. So without further ado, we're going to go to the first panel. So we have Ali from Protocol Labs online. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Carlos. How you going? And 100%, I love hackathons. It's all about innovating and trying new things. So that was, a really good message there.
Definitely. So is it good evening for you, or?
Yeah, I'm in Australia. In case you couldn't tell from the accent, but yeah, so it's 10 o'clock here, 10 p.m. But good morning to everyone over in Europe, or I don't know what time it is in America. Probably super late there. I don't know.
I think they're still asleep. I think they're still asleep there.
Yeah, they might be. Yeah, a bit of
Fantastic.
crossover here though, which is cool.
Yeah, I was saying on the start of the session yesterday, we have people from 46 nationalities crossing 16 time zones. So some people are definitely asleep. Others are kind of midway through the afternoon. Others, like me, are just starting the day. And some others like you. There are some people from Australia participating in the hackathon as well. So some are kind of in their kind of early evening or late evening. So I think this is going to be fun. Ali, the stage is yours. I'm looking forward to your session.
I will just, I don't think I can share the screen, Carla.
I've just stopped my sharing. You should be able to share now.
Actually got a disabled participant screen sharing message. Might need to enable it for me.
Just a second. Oh, done. You should be able to go now.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Alrighty. Cool. G'day, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are. And let me know in the chat. I'd love to hear where you're from. This kind of one of those really unique things about, virtual hackathons that we can tune in and participate from everywhere. So it's cool getting to know so many different nationalities as well. So I'm super excited to be here today, and shout out to Faber, Carlos, and all the organizers for running this awesome event to participate and build at. Like I kind of said, I love hackathons because they're really an amazing way to harness the power of community and innovation. And they really kind of capture the spirit of why I got into tech in the first place, which is the impact that innovation and innovative science and tech can really have. There's like a huge capability for tech to help transform our lives and the way our society functions. We can see that just by, how we survived over COVID if we weren't able to communicate like via Zoom and by digital tech. So it can really create new industries and collaboration paths and really help us solve complex problems. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying really looking forward to seeing the projects and ideas that come out of this. Also joined here today by Biscuit. He's our Filecoin corgi. I've just named him Biscuit too. He's a good doggo and he'll be helping me with my demo today. So say hi to Biscuit. So I'm Ali, Australian, as I said, developer advocate here at Filecoin, which means I get to work on my passion, which is helping enable others to build out their ideas and supporting developers on their own journey. And I'm really part of this big open source Web3 project, which I kind of coin as the ultimate open source project in blockchain and the wider tech community. So I've got a mechatronics and computer science background. I'm a developer. I used to own a cafe as well. But yeah, my passion is in developer advocacy these days. So that's a little bit about me. If you want to know more, feel free to hit me up as well. So what's on the agenda today? Firstly, I am going to show you how to make a NFT, how to code one up and make a front end and connect to that front end and deploy it today. And I'm going to show you why IPFS and Filecoin are important in NFTs. And if you didn't catch the session by my colleague Konstantin yesterday on, kind of some of the use cases of NFTs, don't worry, I'm going to go through a little bit of background on them first. And if before you tune out as well, they're not all just hype, just in case, because I know there's a lot of noise around NFTs at the moment, so we want to break that down. But really, I want to be a little bit more hands-on. So I'm going to do that by showing you how you can create an NFT contract in Solidity, use IPFS and Filecoin dev tool project called NFT.storage to ensure we store the NFT metadata securely and persistently and immutably. And I'm also going to show you how to deploy, say you've written a front-end dApp, I'm going to show you how to deploy that on Fleek, which is a hosting site, pretty much like Netlify or Vercel, but it's kind of cooler because you are deploying it with IPFS under the hood. So it gives you this hash for the content, and you can ensure that it's the same content every time, unless of course you change the Git, which, you know, that's exactly what you want to do with a hosting site. Anyway, I'm going to show you, you know, hands-on how to do a couple of those things. So let's talk about NFTs. NFTs have become a really big story in the last year or so. So with celebrities and big brands everywhere releasing their own NFT collections, millions of dollars changing hands for them. Auction houses like Sotheby's getting involved in auctioneering them. Tweets and code have been sold as NFTs, and even the Australian Open tennis tournament, which was held here in Melbourne recently, released NFTs allowing people to own a piece of the action on the courts. So there's really a lot of noise and hype going on in the NFT space. And when you start your NFT journey, it can be a little overwhelming to look past some of this noise and to try and get a clear understanding of what the inherent nature of a non-fungible token, NFT, is. Because they're not just collectible digital assets, but they can have a lot of utility outside this, and they have the potential to really disrupt some industries or to enhance others. As we've already started to see with some artist markets that you might be aware of. So, you know, we've all heard the stories about how Spotify and YouTube aren't really paying their creators. And this is kind of spawning new industries with NFTs to give like kind of artists control of their own work back. First, so what's an NFT? A non-fungible token. Is it, you know, if non-fungible? When I first saw that, I just went, is this part of the mushroom family? Okay, not really. Obviously not. But a non-fungible asset simply means that it's unique. It has a limited number associated with it. So unlike other assets, like, for example, Bitcoin or money, where you can trade one Bitcoin or euro for another Bitcoin or euro and you have the exact same thing, NFTs are all one-of-a-kind assets. So the analogy is more akin to trying to swap the Mona Lisa for Girl with a Pearl Earring. They're not equivalent. So this non-fungibility and their basis on blockchain gives NFT some essential properties. And I know my colleague, like I mentioned before, Constantine, gave a great rundown on this yesterday, but just to recap for those that might have missed it, NFTs have these 6 main properties. That is that they're unique, which I just mentioned. That means it can represent a digital physical product like a collectible, a house contract, a vote, or a ticket. They're provably scarce. NFTs have a traceable origin backed by a cryptographic hash, with supply being controlled by the owner or developer. So this has some great applications for, say, collections, gaming assets, or for limited edition representation of items like, I don't know, signed albums or similar things. It could obviously also be used for things like proof of education. Your degree could be an NFT, or for proof of attendance purposes. So there's applications that are way outside just digital art. They have guaranteed ownership, which is a property inherited from the blockchain, and that ensures traceability and data verifiability. So this gives rise to application usage for things like identity and authenticity purposes. So if you want to authenticate that your bottle of wine, for example, is you know, the original bottle of wine and not a copycat version, or your Prada or whatever you're into, your Nikes, then you could use something like an NFT to prove that. So they're fraud resistant. So because NFTs are secured with cryptographic proofs, they can be used in things like voting or membership rights, for securing identity and authenticity again, for legal applications, for both digital and physical things. And I also know, because I'm ex-IBM, that IBM's currently using them to ensure the authenticity of patents, for example. So as an enterprise or business use case there. So 5th property is that they're transferable. So that might seem a bit weird, but NFTs can also be transferable, so they can have value inherently attached to them. And this gives rise to use cases in asset management or finance records, or also royalties. So if you resell an asset, for example, if you resell a song to someone else, you could still keep getting royalties, or you could have a charity NFT that when it's, you know, transferred to someone else for a value, you know, still continues to pay the charity, for example. So there's applications like that we're currently seeing as well. And the last one is they're indivisible, which I've kind of mentioned before, that they can't be used for things, which means that, it's not Bitcoin or money. So that means they can be used for things like fractional ownership purposes, for example, like in real estate, or I saw one with fractional ownership of yachts the other day, which is kind of interesting. So these are the properties that open up a really unique, excuse the pun, opportunity for use cases and applications to be based on NFTs. And this is where I really want to encourage you to start when you're thinking about new applications and use cases they could apply to, and where they could be used in some really interesting ways. So I've talked to a few of the potential applications of NFTs, but really we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of what industries they could apply to, or how they could be integrated with other fast-growing technology fields like IoT, or I know a lot of you are into AI and ML here. And there's definitely applications where integrating these kind of things would be really interesting. One of the other great things about NFTs is because they're based on smart contracts, the code can be extended. It's super flexible. You can then apply it to things like insurance, identity verifications, authentications, and you can trigger these contracts in a trustless, automated way on the blockchain. So cool. I could probably go on about this, but I know I promised you that I was going to show you how to actually code it. So let's get into how we'd go about constructing an NFT. So the current Ethereum, or an Ethereum compatible standard for NFTs, is called ERC 721. So you could code up an NFT from scratch rather than use this standard, but a better approach is to use a community vetted and security audited implementation of this standard, and you can find these on OpenZeppelin. So OpenZeppelin has a range of standard implementations and utility contracts and libraries that they used widely by the industry and community to create not just NFTs, but tokens as well. And they have a bunch of utility contracts as well that are really useful. So you can use these contracts on any Ethereum compatible chains. So your layer 2s like Polygon, or compatible chains. I think AVAX is an AVM compatible chain near. You can use them on anything. So this is a good thing about starting with an Ethereum-based contract if you haven't done much smart contract writing before. So the OpenZeppelin ERC 721 standard, which you can kind of see a little snippet of here, and I think I do have it open somewhere as well. So this is the Open Zeppelin docs here, and gives you a little bit of a rundown on how to create them. And here's the API. This is documentation for coders. You can see all of the functionality there. But the main function we want to look at here is the mint and the set token URI functions though. So if we look at this example contract implementation, we can, which is, I will just click. Hopefully my animation works. Woo, it does. Okay, so this is an example implementation that I've taken straight from the OpenZeppelin documentation. And this, if we have a look at it, it's just showing how to create a game item. So we see this contract creates a numbered ID game item for a player with a wallet address, and it takes a token URI, which is a universal resource identifier, as a parameter. So constructor, ERC 721, the name of the collection, the symbol for the collection. And this function here is where the token gets minted. So address player, the award item, takes the address of the player, so where you're going to, who owns this NFT. And then the string, the token URI. And then, it mints that item, and then it sets the token URI to that NFT. So it's pretty basic code here, and you can make an NFT as simply as that. But this is where it kind of gets interesting, because the token URI is simply a JSON object containing the unique characteristics of the NFT. So for example, here it stores hammer. But what's important is that we really want to ensure that our metadata conforms to the characteristics we're looking for in our NFT. So it's non-fungibility, it's uniqueness. And so where and how we save this metadata is a really important consideration. And there's three main ways to save this NFT metadata. The first one is you can save it in the contract itself, which is probably, you would argue is the best way to do it. But the problem with this is that it can get prohibitively expensive to store information like this, especially on the Ethereum chains and on many chains. So particularly if you've got a large file, for example, images, music, video files, these are really large files, and storing them on especially Ethereum, it's just prohibitively expensive and you don't want to do it. You could also use, like they've done here, a HTTP address to fetch the NFT image. As we can see, they've used it here, but unfortunately there's multiple issues with this. One is that we're relying on someone to continue to pay for this storage, and that the service doesn't go down. And we've all seen Amazon and all the other clouds go down at some point or other. But the second more problematic one is that we're also relying on this HTTP address to always resolve to the same data. If someone wants to change this data and has access to this server, our non-fungibility property would get lost. And that's kind of a big concern when you're trying to make a non-fungible token. So that kind of brings us to the third way. You can save it to IPFS, content ID, and Filecoin. And even actually, Open Zeppelin has some notes on this. So they say at the bottom of this contract implementation, some notes that I just went through, basically, that you probably shouldn't do it the first two ways, and you should probably use IPFS and Filecoin. So I'm not just trying to sell here. It's actually a community standard for doing it. Yeah. So just to backtrack a little bit for those that may have missed what IPFS and Filecoin is as well. So IPFS is a protocol which uses content addressing rather than domain addressing. And that's kind of really interesting when you start going down the rabbit hole and looking at it, and really leads to some cool stuff that you can do with it. But I digress. Basically, instead of having content resolved based on the HTTP like domain name, the content is guaranteed to be the same at the cryptographic hash that we ask for, which is a big benefit for NFTs. So IPFS allows users to store and transfer verifiable content address data in a peer-to-peer network. And it even allows you to persist the data, it allows you to persist the data you want on your own IPFS nodes with pinning. But the data will only exist on the network as long as one user continues to store it, and therefore be able to provide it to others when they request it. So this is where Filecoin comes in. It builds on the unique content addressing of IPFS to add longer-term data persistence with crypto-economic incentives for storage providers. And this ensures files are stored reliably over time, multi-generational, and for multi-generational timeframes if you want, or even just short timeframes. If you only want to save it for a day, you can also do that. Probably not with NFTs, but you get my drift. And it's cheap and it's stored in multiple places at once because it's a distributed network. So this is why we use IPFS and Filecoin for NFTs, because you need storage that's off-chain. On-chain's too expensive. You need a fixed address for the content to live, which is where IPFS comes in. And you need storage that's persistent and reliable, which is where Filecoin comes in. Now, building directly on IPFS and Filecoin isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. So what has been built out is a few helper tools that kind of enable us to have a couple of lines of code inside our front end to enable us to do that. And one of the big ones is NFT storage. So NFT storage is, primarily storage for NFTs. So to store this kind of metadata, and they're offering it for free at the moment, and all you do is get an API key, you put it into your code, and you can use NFT storage and then send that to your contracts. But okay, so this is the project that I've kind of created for you guys, a little Faber Web3 Hackathon project. Let's take a look at it if I can find it. So here it is here. I think this is just my local host version. Yep, it is. So basically, you know, just need to connect to a wallet, which I might need to see my toolbar for. So I'll just back up a little bit. So sorry, I always have so many tabs open that I have a suspender on just to save myself some storage on Chrome. Anyway, so this is NFT storage. These are the docs. It's pretty easy to start with. You just create an account like you do with anything else. And then all of a sudden, you can, you know, store as many things as you like. And I think if I just go to this page, I should be able to see all the files that I've previously saved going through my front end, which are going to take a while to load because I think I've saved so many things. So if we have a look here, you can see that this is the IPFS hash, and that can represent a bunch of different things. It could just be one image, it could be a whole JSON file, it could be multiple JSON, like multiple images or multiple NFTs in a JSON file that you pull out as you like. It can basically be anything. So that's the flexibility there. All right, let's jump into the code though. So where have I got my code? Sorry guys. All right, here we go. So all I've done here is to create this program is to create a pretty basic backend Solidity contract, or backend Solidity contract, I should say, which is Ethereum language. And you can see I've imported the Open Zeppelin contract to do this. Excuse me. So I'm creating a Filecoin ticket NFT, which I'm going to give you a link to near the end of this talk, so you can go and mint one for yourself on the Ringfear network, so you can get free ETH to mint it, and look at it on Rarible or OpenSea, which are two big NFT marketplaces. But basically, I've created a contract which creates this Filecoin ticket NFT. I'm using some helper functions to keep track of the token IDs. So each NFT in this collection, in this contract, will have a specific ID because, like I said, they're all unique. I'm only going to allow 100 NFTs to be minted here. So I am, you know, creating a collection that's only ever going to have 100 NFTs. So that's my max NFTs function there. And I'm just going to store some details about the NFT in this struct here. So for example, the owner, the URI, which will be an IPFS address, and the token ID, just so that I can get that collection back and display it on my front end easily. I've also got a couple of events here. So when we do mint a new NFT, an event will be emitted to the blockchain, which my front end can keep, a track of. So the event can then be pulled in to my React front end with just a basic listener. And I'll always have an updated site that way. So my constructor, the ERC 721, the NFT standard, is going to create this name, and well, this isn't the best symbol, but so Faber Web3 Hack 2022, Filecoin starter NFTs. And I've set my max NFTs there to 100. Then I've got a second function, and this is where all the action happens. So when someone, you know, connects, I will need to connect to my wallet. So, but when someone presses this button here, so enters their name, and I'm just going to write, so I've actually also put a limiter, as you might have seen here, this account already owns a ticket. So I've actually put a limiter in here because I only want one of these NFTs per address. So I've coded that into my contract so that only one NFT can be minted per address. So I'm just going to change accounts, just a sneaky way around it really. And I'll be able to mint another NFT here. So hi, Faber. This is really meant to have a name on it because it's, you know, the idea is that it's a ticket. So you can, you know, personalize this, write your own name, put your ETH address in, something like that. And then when I click this mint NFT button, basically my React front end will hit the contract here, mint my NFT. This is where it checks that I don't already have NFT. And then it safe mints. So it safe mints to the person that's asking for it with the token ID. And then I'm setting the token URI, which I pass into it because I'm going to dynamically generate the SVG that's displayed on this front end here, on the front end, and pass that into my contract. So that's what I'm doing there. And then, yeah. And then I admit this event that a new NFT has been minted. So that's the basic contract there. If you do have any questions, please feel free to shout out. And I actually can't really see the chat, so apologies for that. But if you do have any questions, please, shout out or feel free to ask at any time or get in touch with me after this. So let's get to the front end where all the magic happens with NFT storage. So this is a basic a Create React app for, I think most people have probably heard of Create React app. You could do this in JavaScript, any kind of front end you like, basically. But this is where the magic happens because I'm using NFT storage from nft.storage. And like I said, all I had to do was create an account and get an API key. So I've created an API key for this React app NFT storage key. I won't show you mine because, security and all that. But as an example, this is what I'm using, just an API key in my front end app. Excuse me. All right, where's my function? All right. So when I do click on, create NFT, basically, it is going to be this create NFT functionality. And also I'll give out the GitHub link for this so you can go through this at your own leisure and have a look how I've done it and maybe fix up some of the mess. I did this in a bit of a hurry, but basically I can show you what the create NFT data does. So I connect to NFT storage. So I'm creating an NFT storage client with my API key. And I'm then going to create the data for my image, which I'll put in JSON. And I do that by, I've got a base SVG here. It's super long, but because I didn't, it's quite a complicated image and I just created it with an online version. There's probably ways to optimize this, but I've basically got this base SVG. And at the end of that, I'm appending the person's name that they input. So this name is our input tag, and then finishing the SVG with that. And I'm just using this crypto.js encrypt library just to make sure someone doesn't try to create a different image to send to our contract instead, because I kind of want to ensure that. But those are front end security issues. So then all I have to do is go client.store and I pass in the JSON that I want, which is the name, description, the image, and maybe any traits or anything else you want to add to this NFT. For example, I've gone traits awesomeness 100 here, but you could add any trait you wanted into your JSON, or you could also just pass the image that you wanted into your contract and do the traits on the actual contract itself, because they're probably not as storage consuming, so it wouldn't be as expensive to do that. So that's another possibility here. But then I just, so this will go through to NFT storage, be stored automatically and give us back an IPFS cryptographic hash, which I think we should be able to see in my thing here. So this is where it says metadata saved, and this is NFT storage returning with an object. And as you can see, this is the IPFS URL that it's saved as. So it's just saved as IPFS cryptographic hash / metadata.json. And further data, description, image, name, all those things that we just sent in. So really cool, really easy. And I'll just get rid of this remix. I was going to show you how to test your contract, but probably don't need that. And that's really all it is. That's all you have to do to save your data to the front end. And I'll just approve this transaction. So because I haven't approved it, it's still loading. So the image has been created on nft.storage, but I haven't confirmed this to be an NFT yet. So I haven't sent this transaction to the blockchain. So I'm just going to confirm that to actually mint my NFT. And pending transaction. Awesome. So we've minted it. So now we can see that transaction on Etherscan. I'll just get rid of that one. So Ringpy testnet transaction. So make sure if you do go to this site later that you are on the Ringpy testnet, not spending real F on this. You can then go and see your NFT on Rarible. So Rarible or OpenSea, excuse me. It does take a while to propagate through to these, so it might not be immediately available. But OpenSea and Rarible, and by the way, OpenSea does use IPFS and Filecoin for their minting. They've got a, mint an NFT, you just drag and drop, and you can basically create a collection in OpenSea itself. And they do use IPFS and Filecoin for their metadata as well, which is kind of fun fact there. But yeah, you will be able to see this token. It just takes a while for it to propagate through to these platforms. And that's basically it for saving to NFT storage. The only other thing that I maybe want to talk about here is, this is my ask contract to mint NFT. So this was my create the NFT metadata and send through nft.storage. And then this is me asking the contract to mint that NFT. So sending it to my contract function just here. And you can have a look through that if you don't know already. And this is where I set all that contract address and the Rarible, where to go, the links basically, the Rarible link, the OpenSea link, the Etherscan link. So I set them here. So the other thing that you might be interested in knowing about is how am I getting these images to display in my front end. So, if we have a look again at this token metadata and say I go to this, let's get this URL. So it says IPFS / cryptographic hash meta.json.data. If I open that up in Chrome browser, did that work? Whoops. It won't actually work. And that's because Chrome browser doesn't by default have IPFS installed on it. So we need kind of a HTTP gateway. If you're using something like Brave browser, or I think Opera as well, they natively have IPFS links installed in them. So if you're in Brave browser, you can go straight to that link. And this is actually Brave browser, so I might just put it in here. And Brave will use a IPFS HTTP gateway to return the data for us, which is cool, but we want to be able to use it on any browser we go to, right? So in order to do that on my front end, what I'm doing is creating an image URL for creating an IPFS gateway link in order to display it. So I will retrieve the data from the backend, from the function where I was storing all of those in an array basically. So every time one was minted, I put it in an array, and I had a fetch function where I could see that data. So every time we reload this page, it will get this NFT collection, of which there is currently 2. And it fetches this back. And then I need to convert this IPFS link into something that's readable on any browser. So I do that by using a HTTP gateway, basically. And you can have a look at, there's a web page where you can have a look at the status of HTTP or IPFS, sorry, HTTP bridge links. So you can have a look at all the people that are using them. But this is usually the recommended one, and it's HTTPS, the link, so the cryptographic hash, IPFS.dweb.link. And that's how I'm basically fetching it on the front end. It's really kind of as simple as that. There's my fetch NFT function as well. Yeah, I think that's about it then for creating the NFT contract and creating this whole thing. As I mentioned, I've got a GitHub and happy for you to use that. But otherwise, feel free to play around with this yourself. I'm just going to post the link into the Zoom chat now. So this is currently hosted, and how I'm hosted it, and it's on a different contract, so there's actually none that's been minted yet, but I've posted that into the chat, so feel free to jump on there and mint yourself your own Faber Web3 NFT. But I am using Fleek in order to host this. So Fleek is a really cool Netlify / Vercel like deployer, so hosting provider. But what's unique about it is that it is using IPFS, or you can choose to use IPFS under the hood to host things. So this gives you some guarantees, and it's like kind of my favorite thing. And I've just hosted, it's super simple, like it's as simple as connecting to the GitHub that branch that you want to host off. If you make a change on the GitHub branch, it will automatically redeploy. But yeah, basically all you have to do is connect to this to your GitHub account where your code's hosted, and then yeah, add your environment variables if you like. So some of your advanced build settings there, which I've just shown the world, but all good. And it will continuously deploy. You can obviously, also then attach a domain name that you want to it, or you can just use their generic one, which in this case is Snowy Sun. Kind of cool. So I really recommend checking out Fleek if you want to really have your front end dApps be hosted in a decentralized and reliable manner as well. I think that is just about all I had for you guys on the live code. As I mentioned, please feel free to ask any questions you might have of me here. Just already went through that one, so probably don't need it. So yeah, mint your own Faber Web3. I've shown you the link there. You can get Ringpy ETH on faucets.chain.link/Ringpy as well if you do need some fake ETH to mint one. Thank you again. It meant a lot. I like that. Nice pun. And there's the GitHub link as well if you do want to use this as the basis of some of your projects. But thanks all, and hopefully that will help some of you now or in future when you watch this asynchronously to get started with your potential NFT projects. I think that's about it for me, Carlos. I might be a little early on the timing there even.
No, that was great, Ali. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I'm certainly going to run and try to get one of those 100 NFTs. I want one for the Faber Web3 Hackathon, so I'll certainly do that. That was very cool. I'm also looking forward to kind of start minting my own NFTs. That was a very good insight of how to do it. Let me just see if there are any questions from the attendees.
Definitely. So I know it was a little bit quick, and maybe if you don't have an understanding of Solidity or how to develop on Solidity. So in those, you can have a look at my GitHub notes as well. It might give you a better idea of some of the tools that I've used to create these contracts and put it all together and deploy it as well. So I'm using a service to deploy these contracts and things like that.
And is Fleek kind of a distributed version of Netlify, for instance? It seems very similar, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's exactly. It's so similar, except for that it uses IPFS hashes for your content. So you can kind of always go back to that hash, pretty much like GitHub does. You commit something and you get, each commit kind of hash. It's a little bit like that. So that's kind of cool. But definitely, if you are going to create, decentralized products, then you really want to be hosting it in a decentralized manner as well. And that's where kind of Fleek steps in, which is awesome.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I'll give it a try. I've been using Netlify for some time, but I'm going to give it a try to Fleek as well. So thank you very much. That was a really cool session. So we're gonna have this. So we're recording this, and we're gonna have this published sometime next week, so people can go over with more detail. And I'm sure they're gonna kind of be looking at it step by step. Ali, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you. We're now going for a break, a 15-minute break, and we're gonna come back at 15 to noon in this case, but depending on your time zone, that may be slightly different. So 15 to, we'll be back, 15 minutes break. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, everyone. And happy hacking. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with.
Thank you. Hello, welcome back. So after that fantastic talk from Ali on minting your own NFTs, we're now going to be joined by Tiago. Tiago is a co-founder and CTO of Polkastarter, and he's going to be talking to us about DeFi. So he's going to give us an overview of DeFi and how you can start working on DeFi. Hi, Tiago. Yeah, I think you're muted. Yeah. Okay, you're good.
Thanks, Paul, for the invitation. How are you guys?
Great. It's a pleasure to have you here today with us. So we're not going to waste any more time. People are already fed up of listening to me. The floor is yours. Go ahead, Tiago.
Cool. So I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to share my screen. I think it's a lot easier. So I'll share screen and I'll open up. Can you guys hear me? I guess so, right?
Yeah.
Good. So I'm going to talk about introduction to DeFi for developers. My name is Tiago Martins, but I go by myself by Tiago Makes in the internet for quite a while. It's my first Twitter handle, so I just kept with it. And today the talk is going to be around, I guess, 35, 40 minutes. I'm trying to make it as interesting as possible. I don't want to give you a hard time. And most importantly, I wanted to make it as useful as possible. So what am I going to talk about today? So first of all, very, very briefly, who am I and why the hell you should be listening to me in some cases. A general intro to DeFi and a high-level DeFi dApp stack tutorial. And finally, because I believe that the best way to learn is actually putting yourself in a real example. And I'm going to show you how, in a very high level, how we built Polkastarter to what it is today, which is a DeFi dApp. So who the hell am I? Very short. This is basically my Twitter handle for a long time. I love this guy. It's called Paul from the movie Paul. He's an alien. And so basically, I'm a computer scientist by trade. I graduated in computer science back in 2012, I think. And then I realized that one of the biggest problems with education is I didn't actually learn how to code in university, as I think most people don't really know how to code right after getting out of university. So I was really frustrated and I thought, what is the best approach to actually learn how to code? And I thought it's by real examples. So me and my co-founders created one of the first project-based education system platform called CodePlace back in 2013. It was actually called Stuck.io. It was extremely successful. We had 100,000 students from 100 plus countries, and we were basically teaching Ruby on Rails. And I had a lot of fun doing it. Didn't make a lot of money, but that doesn't matter because I learned a lot and had a lot of fun. Then CodePlace was acquired by Academia de Código, and I became a computer science professor there. But I was in the crypto bandwagon since I think 2014. So I started getting myself into Bitcoin, understanding what it was. I read the original white paper, sorry, not white paper, but the Satoshi paper. And yeah, so I started going through the rabbit hole. And back then I was trying to understand how the market dynamics worked. So I did a really very basic analytics platform, on-chain analytics platform. And I showed it to my friends in Lisbon while I was doing being a professor, and they really liked. So I joined a team at CoinVision, which was one of the first magazines, I would call it a magazine, that basically we reviewed ICOs and projects. So back then in 2017, there was a big ICO hype, and the problem with that, a lot of projects didn't really have enough technical due diligence. So basically what we did was we actually went down the rabbit hole for each of the project and actually reviewed them, met the team, met the stack, and actually gave advice, not financial advice, just advice of whether the project was suited or not to actually invest in. After that, the market crashed, so I had to get another job in aerospace. So that's a different story. But then finally, one of my ex-co-founders at CoinVision invited me to become a co-founder at Polkastarter, which I'm going to show you what it is now. So for those of you don't know what Polkastarter is a launchpad. And a launchpad, just think like it's like Seeders, sorry for the pun, Carlos, or Kickstarter, but for blockchain projects. So basically we help out blockchain projects to raise capital directly from the community, right? And we started it in 2020. I'll give it a tutorial of how Polkastarter works later on, but essentially we just help blockchain projects raise funds from the community. And in the last year since its inception, so we founded it back in 2020, so horrible year, in September. And we helped, like I think 2 weeks ago, the 100th funded projects. Around 30,000 people participated in these IDOs, and we helped projects raise over $40 million. So that was a hell of a year for us. And we grew the team from 4, which was the 3, which was the original team. And now we're around, with product team, marketing team, and everyone, I think we're about 35 right now. And we're all bootstrapped, which I'm really, really proud to say. Yeah, so that's Polkastarter, that's myself. But I think what you guys are here for is learning a bit more about DeFi, which is one of my biggest passions. DeFi, just to start off, it stands for as simple as decentralized finance, okay? And most of the people, when they hear DeFi or finance, they think of people like this, like Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street, 1990, I think. But it actually is, they think like just like a bunch of greedy developers trying to make as much money as possible, but it's like the farthest from the truth. What DeFi really is actually this. It's people trying to build a better financial system that will benefit the majority of society. So the approximate definition of DeFi, and I tried to find what is the best realistic definition, is actually putting it as a goal. So the goal of DeFi development is to create an open and financial market that is trustless and permissionless. So what does this mean exactly? So I created this slide that basically shows what life is before DeFi and after DeFi. And I had a lot of these problems before DeFi, and that's why I have such a passion for the work that's been going on from the community. So in the traditional financial system, just a couple of examples. So whenever you want to, for example, get a loan for your house, let's say you want $100,000 for you to buy a house, the only people that decide that if you should get that loan is your bank. And it goes through a long paper trail that it's based on assumptions and not actual reality. So do you have a job? How much do you make? But in the end, it's 1 or 2 people that actually decides if they're in a good mood, if you actually get credit towards your house. So that's one of the main problems. The other biggest problem, actually, I think it's the biggest problem, is because governments do not have they have full control of the currency. They decide how much you can actually buy with your money. So what does this mean? So $1,000 today is not the same as $1,000 10 years ago, because governments print money, they issue coins in terms of in exchange for debt. So basically, it's an inflationary asset. The euros or dollars you have is actually it's worth less and less every year. And finally, and I just saw this tweet today that Canada actually froze the assets of the protesters. So governance, whenever they want, they just can call the banks and say, hey, I want you to freeze the assets of this person, that person, and that person, because we think they're misbehaving. So it's a good system. I think capitalism completely works, but I think there's a lot of middlemen and a lot of people in power that get control of the masses. And that's what DeFi is about. DeFi is actually giving people the community's power back. So in DeFi, with the DeFi protocols and dApps that we're creating, your credit score, for example, is based on your actual collateral. So let's say I want to take a loan of $100,000. So there's actually smart contracts that if I deposit my actual current Bitcoin or Ethereum, they immediately can tell what is the allowed credits. So basically, if I want $100,000 in as a loan, I have to deposit around $200,000 in Bitcoin. What this means is it's actually a good system because it's not credit based, it's equity based. So the actual smart contract controls the actual credits. Another one that's really, really important is no one can freeze your assets, because if the DeFi dApps are truly non-custodial, only you have access to your accounts. There are some DeFi apps that are custodial, but most of them are non-custodial, which I'll show you in a minute. And last but not least, I think the main utility right now with DeFi is lending protocols, which I have a weird fetish around weird lending protocols for some reason. And basically it's a way of borrowing and lending money. So typically, whenever you ask credit for a bank, they lend you the money, but they charge a fee per year. So let's say like it's 1 or 2% per year. In DeFi, the same happens, but it basically matches people that want to lend their money and people borrowing their money. And because there's no middleman, there's a higher interest on the fees earned for whoever lends the money, and you can get cheaper interest as well when you're borrowing the money. So, and this is all happens through smart contracts. So there's no fear of loss to misappropriation, unless of course there's hacks. That's one of the issues, but that's another story. So, but basically this is life before DeFi and life after DeFi. So, but the DeFi ecosystem is huge. It doesn't end here. It covers like wealth and asset management, prediction markets. We have some friends that works there, talented people also from Portugal, Poker markets, lending, which I just talked about. Oops. Oh, Pedro is here. How do I close this? Infrastructure, marketplaces and liquidity, which is a big portion of DeFi. Stable coins, which is basically an alternate to government issue currency, such as BUSD, TUSD, and GUSD, and so many others. And they have multiple ways of actually how they work. Payments, and finally compliance and identity, which is like KYC, decentralized authentication, and so on. So there's a lot going on. And for you guys, I really want to build the next version of DeFi. There's a lot you can do. Oops, I think I have a comment here. How do I see this? Sorry. Oh, okay. Hi, good morning, Pedro. Yeah, so I don't know how long you guys been in crypto, but back in 2017, when the bubble burst very publicly, there was the traditional way of measuring success, which is CoinMarketCap. You guys know CoinMarketCap.com. So it's basically just the important metrics are circulating market cap and total daily volume. But that doesn't mean the actual project is useful. It just means what is the speculative value of that project. So it's basically like a popularity context or a hype game. The difference with DeFi, and something I really like, there's a new metric that really values the utility of the DeFi protocol, which is called TLV. And it's a very important metric for you guys to understand. TLV simply translates to total locked value. And it's basically the overall value of crypto assets deposited in a decentralized finance protocol. So whilst the old way of measuring the success of a blockchain project was market cap, with DeFi, you can actually track the actual utility value using TLV, which is extremely important and basically measures the utility and the trustworthiness that that project has. And as an example, there's a lot of lists of total lock value, but these are the top 10 right now. So Maker has 16 billion total lock value. Curve Finance, which is a yield lending platform, it's 11 billion. Aave, another yield lending. Compile, another yield lending. Yearn Finance. So most of them are actually yield lending, but a lot of them are AMMs, so automated market makers. But yeah, this way we can actually see the actual utility that the project has been given. So you actually can create a model, a fair market modeling, value investing based on the actual utility of the project. So that's basically TVL in a nutshell. So in summary, very, very simple introduction to DeFi. DeFi stands for decentralized finance. The goal of DeFi is to create an open financial market that is trustless and permissionless. DeFi is improving many financial sectors such as asset management, lending, borrowing, KYC, compliance, and whatnot. And you typically measure a DeFi product success by total value locked. So that's in a nutshell. I'll share a lot of resource in the end, and I'll put it into Twitter so you can learn more about what DeFi is. But now let's get into actually coding. I'm not going to share actually any coding, any scripts or coding, but I'm just going to give you a high level overview for you to understand of what it takes to actually build a DeFi dApp, right? So for those of you who don't know, like the area we're talking about is called Web3. And what is the difference between Web2 and Web3? There's a lot of definitions, but I think this is the most appropriate one. So basically is what in Web2, there were a lot of companies that used various APIs to actually provide services for users. The problem is that those end users don't own any of the data. So basically they're black boxes, right? They work great experiences, but behind the app, you don't really know what's going on. So for example, Spotify, you have no idea if the fees are being distributed to the musicians. Upwork, you have to trust that Upwork is actually managing the payments for the freelancers correctly. GoDaddy, when you try to buy a domain, you don't really know if that price is actually fair because it's a premium domain, and many, many others. Google, there's no introduction necessary to actually the problems that they've been having lately. So basically Web3 is by using a new stack, you're basically decentralizing a lot of the data and a lot of the information flow that's taken care of. Falcon is a great example. So instead of you hosting files in Dropbox or Amazon AWS, you're storing Filecoin in the blockchain. Instead of basically buying a GoDaddy domain and registering on ICANN, you just register on ENS on the blockchain, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's just Web3 is permissionless Web2. So basically, it adds the ownership layer. So users can actually own and be able to see what goes on behind the scenes. I think that's the best definition, and this is highly opinionated. This is my opinion only. And funny enough, I love the statistic. There's not a lot of Web3 developers. Web3 developers constitute like mostly Solidity developers, Solana, and all blockchain layer 1 solutions in terms of coding. And also you can actually constitute the ones like that are front-end developers that interact directly with Web3 front-end clients. But in total, there's an estimated 20,000 Web3 developers. And considering there's around 30 million developers, we're a very, very small bunch. So, and the funny thing is, it's 1.81 trillion actually not controlled, but created from 20,000 developers. So there's a huge, what I think there's a lot of ways you can look at this number, but the way I think it is, which is in a sunny day scenario, is there's high efficiency here. So it doesn't take a lot of developers to actually build a product that can scale tremendously, because the infrastructure can handle and it's ready for scale. That's the whole point. So what is a current dApp Web3 stack? And I'm just going to go from the left to the right, and then I'm going to show you a real example of actually how it fits. So starting with a blockchain, first you need to pick a blockchain. So L1 blockchains such as Ethereum or Solana is basically where the whole code is going to be deployed at, and transactions will be transacted in that blockchain. Layer 2 and sidechains, I'm not going to go into it, but basically layer 2 and sidechains solve problems of layer 1 in terms of scalability and gas costs. So sometimes it gets really, really expensive to run transactions on layer 1 solutions. So layer 2s help with that. So basically they batch transactions and other kinds of ways to actually make the TX costs a lot better. So how do you develop smart contracts or programs for Solana in a day-to-day basis? So basically you need a development environment, such as like Ruby on Rails or other full stack Web 2 development environments. You have development environments just for Web3. One of the most used and my personal favorite, which has been getting a lot of popularity, is Hardhat. So basically with Hardhat or Truffle, you create your personal blockchain in your computer, which you can actually try, compile Solidity programs and run test-driven development methods to make sure the whole thing works from beginning to end. So it's a complete suite that lets you create your own personal environment in your computer as it was a blockchain. You can actually set the blockchain, speed up the blockchain to actually test timestamps. There's a lot of fun you can do with it. So before anything else, I think you should try Hardhat or Truffle. There's a lot of tutorials that can just set you up in your local blockchain, and you can tell your friends that you basically set up that in 5 minutes. After you have that and you deployed your first contract to layer 1 solutions, either on testnet or mainnet, you can start getting creative. So for example, file storage, there's a lot of talk in this hackathon. So you have IPFS and Filecoin that you can store your data. Instead of using your own legacy AWS services, you can basically store data on those services, services there, completely permissionless and transparent. Off-chain data protocols, I'm not going to go too much around, but basically they're a way of actually caching some of the data off-chain, so for immediate access. Indexing, querying the graph is really, really nice. So what is the graph? So imagine I deploy a staking contract. Instead of me pinging that contract directly, a lot of times, which can get not expensive but slow. Basically what the graph does, it creates an index of that smart contract and translate into a GraphQL API to be consumed for you or by anyone. So in terms of DeFi, this is really important because there's a big class called DeFi aggregators that basically aggregate a lot of DeFi dApps and protocols. And typically they use the graph to actually query their APIs directly through the graph. So without actually having to know the ABI endpoints for each smart contract, it just standardizes in one nice API for you to consume. Finally, you have identity, of course. Most of you know MetaMask, I guess, but Wallet Connect is a great solution that basically connects to other wallets like Trust Wallet and so on. And finally, if you want to actually make a Web3 dApp for MetaMask to actually connect, you tend to need a library. So like Web3.js and Ethers. So basically it's just an abstraction of a way of connecting your decentralized application to the actual smart contracts and getting a persistent connection to the blockchain. So that's the Web3 stack in overview, but I'll give you a real example in a minute. So, and this is, and I want to bring you to here in terms of DeFi, and this is completely opinionated. This is my opinion. I didn't take this from anywhere, But the way I see it, there are 4 types of dApps in the DeFi ecosystem. And I'm going to go through all of them. So custodial and non-custodial. Probably you heard about these terms in the traditional finance sector, but what this essentially means is in a custodial environment, the actual company owns the wallet. So whenever you deposit funds, they actually have full control. Non-custodial means even though they created a protocol that handles those transactions and funds, you actually own the wallets. And then in hybrid and full dApp, basically the way I see it is, are you still using some Web2 infrastructure to store the data, host a website and whatnot, or you're completely using permissionless systems such as Filecoin and IPFS to actually host that data? So in practical terms, PolkaStarter currently is a hybrid. So we do have a lot of smart contracts that handle all the funds. Everything that's transaction related and money related, we use smart contracts. But the actual data, let's say the images, the projects, descriptions, the actual website is hosted on AWS and other things. So we're still a hybrid, but hopefully by version 4 will be a completely full dApp, and that brings us closer to the DAO. So let's just summarize the DeFi Web3 stack. So a dApp is a centralized application. That's basically what it is. It is typically built with a development environment like Hard Hats, compiled and deployed on a blockchain like Ethereum, and allows users to interact with via a library like Web3.js and MetaMask. A DeFi dApp is typically non-custodial, which means that the users have full control over the wallets. And now comes the fun part. So I think, as I said before, the best way of actually learning about something is to put into a real world context. And I used PolkaStarter as a real example of how we actually built our DeFi dApp. So first of all, what is PolkaStarter? I already explained it's a launchpad, but what problems are we solving? So basically the problem we're solving is around VC angel fundraising. So normally a company decides that it wants to raise, say, $1 million to build out its vision. I want to build the best app on the planet to do something, right? Normally they spend months looking for VCs that are in that ecosystem and understand what you're building. They trust the founders. After you get the VCs on board, you spend thousands of dollars in expensive lawyers. It can go to 40 to 100K in lawyers if you're raising $1 million. So it's really an expensive process with a lot of due diligence. And in the end, VCs will own and control a big part of the company. This can be good, of course, because they get involved. They have skin in the game, but at the same time, you kind of like lose a lot of share of your company at the get-go in the first days before actually building anything. So what PolkaStarter does is we have a system called IDO, which is called Initial Decentralized Offering, which is basically like angel fundraising. And the process is a bit simpler. So a company applies to raise, let's say, $1 million with PolkaStarter. PolkaStarter already has a community of investors. So we have around, I think, 700,000 investors as a community, the total community that are subscribed to our fundraise. And we just ask them, so do you like this project? After the community votes, we send up to our council, which is basically comprised of the leading exchanges and a lot of really important people in the DeFi space. And we evaluate if the actual project is good enough, not good enough in terms of how long it's been in terms of app development, but if the team is solid, basically the decentralized due diligence. And then after everything is approved, so the people voted and the council approves that it's an actual real company with actual potential, the project just deploys what we call a fixed swap smart contract in 5 minutes for $500. That's what it takes to actually put up the contract up. Then the community that basically voted automatically basically can enter that IDO. And at the end of the IDO, they receive the governance tokens. And those tokens can be sold to others. But I'm going to break it step by step. So first of all, there's a new project, we open up for applications. Normally we have around for every other project, we have around let's say 200,000 to 1,000,000 applications. So I know that's quite a lot. So you're asking how can you actually fit all those people in Polkastarter? So you don't. One of the reasons, one of the ways that we keep the projects happy and the community happy is if we give a positive ROI to people that invest. So we have to keep the unique participants not that high, but also not that low. So we always aim for 2,000 to 3,000 project participants. And how do you pick that? So we have a system called the on-chain lottery that it basically calculates based on the amount of polls you have. So it's our native Polkastarter governance tokens. The higher probability, the more you have, the higher probability you can get into an IDO. Okay, that's it. After the company deploys the contract with us, the contract is whitelists those lottery winners, and only those lottery winners can actually enter the IDO. So after when the IDO starts, those whitelisted participants can swap their ETH or USDT with governance tokens at a fixed price. And after the IDO ends, participants can claim their tokens immediately. So they don't have to wait. They don't have to trust the project. Everything is handled by the smart contract. So in the beginning, the project stakes the governance tokens directly in the smart contract. And in the end, those contracts get distributed automatically through the smart contract to the participants. So essentially, we decentralize fundraising at best. So you must be curious, so what is our stack? So our stack is basically composed by 3 layers: smart contracts, middleware, and apps. As I said, we're still a hybrid app. So we still host a lot of things off-chain, but essentially our smart contracts are the fixed swap, which handles the IDO process, the NFT swap, which handles NFT sales, which is an upcoming feature we just finished yesterday, QA. Then you have the SIG whitelisting. Basically, it's just a smart contract that allows whitelisting to be really cheap because on-chain whitelisting can be really, really expensive. We have the smart contract that has our pulse staking system. And right now, to date, I think we have $60 million staked in pulse. So that's the amount of people that are willing to stake their pulse in order to participate in IDOs. Then we have the lottery smart contract, and then we have the counterpart Solana program. So basically, because we all written in Solidity from the start, we had to basically rewrite and recompile in Solana to handle Solana IDOs. Then we have the middleware. One of the big problems in Web3 is actually onboarding and actually, as you know, finding Web3 developers. So we found a really creative way of actually onboarding our developers to Web3. So we created this NPM package called Polkastarter.js. And what it does essentially is it abstracts a lot of smart contract functionality and calls into one API NPM package that the front-end team can just ping as it was just a standard NPM package with functions. So in this Polkastarter.js package, we do the connections to Infura and Alchemy, which is basically on cloud nodes. So basically, instead of us running our own node of Ethereum or Binance Smart Chain, we pay companies like Infura and Alchemy to host that node for us, and we just call them. Right now, we're compatible with Ethereum, BSC, Avalanche, Shell, Polygon, and Moonbeam. And soon we're going to deploy the Solana using the Solana programs. Also, we use Open Graph and Covalent. So basically, as I said, Open Graph creates a really nice RESTful API endpoint for our staking contract and other endpoints we use. And Covalent we use it for our oracles, for price oracles. So if you want to get the price at any point after the IDO ends of how that project is performant, we ask Covalent, so for this token ticker, what is the price for this right now? And Polkastarter is our internal data warehouse that we just store a lot of stuff, basically. And then in terms of apps, so the first version of Polkastarter was actually written in Rails and vanilla JavaScript. I know we're brave, but always on the bleeding edge. So we had to go really fast. But now we're migrating the Polkastarter UI to React. We're going to keep the Polkastarter backend on Ruby, and we have the Polkastarter Council where the voting happens on a standard Rails app. This is the way our team is structured, and I think this is important for you guys to understand. Like, it doesn't take a lot of people to build DeFi that can have some success, as mentioned. So our team is built like by, I'm the CTO, João is the chief product officer, so he makes most of the product decisions. Then we have Edward as the general project manager that helps fits all the pieces into place. And then we basically divide the team into 5 sections. So we have the backend team, front-end team, on-chain team, DevOps team. We actually need a DevOps team because we have constant DDoS attacks, but that's another conversation. And then finally, you have the analytics team, which is in charge of making our data warehouse consistent and always available, because we have quite a lot of amount of traffic that's always requesting a lot of endpoints. So summary of how Polkastarter is built. Polkastarter is a dApp that allows blockchain companies to raise funds directly from the community in a permissionless way. The actual IDO is fully managed by the fixed swap contract, and our stack can be summarized in 3 groups: on-chain, middleware, and apps. And basically that concludes my talk. I said I thought it was 45 minutes long, but I took a little less than that. But I compiled a really nice list if you want to learn more about DeFi, or if you're actually starting Web3 dev. I'll share this with Carlos after, and I'll put it in my Twitter account. These are just names that people I follow, and I'm a huge fan. And also some resources like Messari yearly reports and How to DeFi books. There are from CoinGecko are huge assets. And then in Web3 Dev, I included guides of how to get started into DeFi dApp developments, going from like the basics to actually token engineering, which I think is really, really helpful when building a new protocol or a dApp. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiago. That was a great talk, and I think you covered DeFi from one end to the other, while also kind of giving us an overview of the full Web3 stack. So that was great. Thank you very much for that. Let's just see if there are any questions from participants. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat, or just raise your hand and I'll give you the word.
People are very nice. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat.
Yeah, there are lots of thank yous.
Yes. Do you have any questions that I didn't cover that I should mention, or, but anyway, feel free to email us, not as much as possible, but if you have really pertinent questions, and if you're new and if you want to find out something I didn't talk about in this DeFi talk, just email me or follow me on Twitter, and I'll be happy to oblige. Pedro, do you have any questions?
He does have a question.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of hype around Portugal right now with Web3. But to be honest, I think the hype is around the non-tax or non-tax legal system on cryptocurrencies. But I think it's a myth, to be honest. I think people should be careful about crypto not being taxed in Portugal. It is true until a point, but other than that, I think for some reason, there's a big developer community moving to Lisbon and Porto. So I've been meeting with a lot of engineers in Porto. I think they move here mainly for the lifestyle, and the same as Lisbon. So I think we're really, really growing strong in that sense. So yeah, I'm loving it.
Another suggestion as well.
Awesome. That's my list.
Okay, Tiago, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. This was great. Wait, there's another question. How are you embracing other big chains like Cardano?
That's a really, really good question. So one of the problems that you face immediately is most of the documentation is based on EVM, so Ethereum Virtual Machine. So Solidity, Viper, and whatnot. Actually, Viper is not that used, but Solidity is where you get the most resources from, right? The problem with that, it only compiles to EVM compatible chains, such as Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, and Polygon. The problem is when you have other L1 blockchains like Solana or Cardano, normally the syntax is completely different. So you have to basically recreate and recompile those contracts. There are some experiments around compilers from Solidity to other languages, but from my experiments, they don't work that well, so I wouldn't trust them. So in that sense, yeah, you need to either learn Rust for, I don't know what Cardano is based on, I never tried Cardano to be honest, but if you want to go to, for example, Solana, you need to learn Rust and basically do the same in the other language. I think that's my pros. Yeah, I'm not sure. I never tried Cardano. I'm completely a Cardano noob, but probably is.
Anyone else has questions? No? Okay, awesome. Tiago, again, thank you very much. This was really useful, and I think our participants will love the insights. We're going to be sharing the video then next week for everyone to be able to watch your presentation again. We're now again moving to a break. After that, we're going to have a session on moving from Web 2 to Web 3 as a developer, and kind of going into the rabbit hole, as Tiago very well described it. So we'll be back at 1 o'clock GMT. So in about 35 minutes. This is a great time if you're in Europe to grab a bite, have something to eat, and be back here in 35 minutes for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Welcome back, everyone. We're back for the next panel after an amazing talk on DeFi. We're now going to be talking about what it takes to move from the Web 2 to the Web 3 as a developer or as any other particular role that you may have. So to help me on this panel, we have Pedro, who's co-founder of Talent Protocol. Also Henrique, who's a senior developer at Henrique Analytics, and Ian from the recruitment team at Protocol Labs. Welcome, Henrique. Welcome, Ian. We're missing Pedro, who should be joining shortly. Hi, Pedro. I think we're all here. Welcome, everyone. So let's get this started. Time is gonna fly, so I'll give you hints on whether you should kind of once I need you to kind of be more short in terms of your answers, I'll let you know. But other than that, feel free to expose your points of view. So just starting by Pedro. Pedro, you have an interesting background because you actually started a recruitment company called called, help me out here, I just forgot.
Landing Jobs, man.
Landing Jobs, sorry. Called Landing Jobs, which I've actually used in the past.
Yes.
So you started a company in the Web2 space for recruitment, and you're now you now left that behind, and you moved to the Web3 space with Talent Protocol, again on the talent space. So my question to you that kind of made that progression, how was your path from kind of being in a Web2 industry and then moving to the Web3 industry? What took you to take that step, and how did you? What challenges did you face, and how do you end up being able to create this new project?
All right. First off, thank you for setting this up, the hackathon, this panel, and inviting me over. Pleasure to be here with you and the rest of the people. A bit of context on your question. So it's pretty clear to me I want to be a founder, a builder throughout my life. I like to build things. I like to build teams as well, to build things, especially in the HR technology space. So my kind of like life purpose is to create tooling or technology that allows people to have more purposeful careers and lives, and also more productive work, and produce more productive work. So having that in mind, after Landing Jobs, I was there for 8+ years. I moved to a non-exec board member role, and I decided to do a sabbatical. So jumping into Web3 was a bit random, but at the same time planned, because I wanted to go deeper into blockchain technology for a while. Just from a mindset perspective, when you're building a startup, you're all in on focus mode, and doing the sabbatical allowed me to go from focus mode to diffuse mode. And when I started to do that, I fell down the rabbit hole, as people say, and started to realize, how amazing this world is. Also, it's still early days, so there's a lot of things to be done, of course. And I had this super old idea, more than 10 years old, was archived somewhere in my brain about, people should be able to be vested into other people's careers somehow. And when I bumped into Web3, I realized, well, with social tokens, and we can try this out. So we set out to build Talent Protocol, which is being built in public, open source, and through Seasons, which is a time-bound iteration system. And we're testing how to do this. Protocol Labs is one of our partners and investors as well, and alongside other people. And what was your second question? Or did I answer the second question?
No, I mean, the second question was around the challenges that you faced coming into the Web3 area, which has its own networks, its own kind of people, its own way of doing things, which is very different from Web2.
It's very different.
So how did you face those challenges?
All right. First off, everything happened super fast. So I thought that, building a startup in Web2 was already 10x faster than anything else in corporate world, and then I come into Web3 and it's 10x from the Web2. So that was a big difference. And also the role that is expected from a CEO or a founder is massively different. The economic value systems, the economic dynamics around the community, the metrics that matter the most for the organization, for the community, are totally different. So I had to do a mindset readjustment last year. But for me, and taking into consideration who I am and how I behave and the things I believe, it made total sense for me. So it was an easy mindset adjustment for me. Yeah.
Henrique, you kind of, I'm going to go with similar questions, but you have a different background. So you started kind of as a postdoc at Microsoft, you worked at startups, you worked at Google, you worked at JP Morgan, and now you're at Dune Analytics. It's been quite a ride for you, I'm sure. Having gone through all of those different jobs, different things, like how did you evolve from working on, what are the differences from working in a typical Web2 startup versus the kind of more corporate world versus now Web3, where you're a tech lead in one of the fastest growing Web3 kind of startups. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey and kind of any challenges that you faced as you moved from the Web2 space to the Web3 space?
Yeah, of course. So hello, everyone. Yeah, it was probably not a typical journey, and it was not necessarily a conscious decision to get into Web3. It just happened in some way. Honestly, I think like we can trace it back to my years as a PhD student, where my research was focused on, consensus protocols way before, Bitcoin even existed. Before, the problem, took such an importance into the world as it has today. So in a way, I was always interested, in crypto and blockchain, but more from an academic and, more protocol-focused perspective. Protocol, I mean, like in the sense of, the actual consensus protocols that power the blockchain. But after I finished my PhD, I went off into a very different direction. As I said, I went to Microsoft Research, where I did research on distributed database systems. I was at Google, where I was a tech lead and manager for Google Docs for the backend team, very focused on storage as well. It was only after Google that I got back into, blockchain, and I went to JP Morgan. As you said, but not to work on any banking stuff, but to work on their blockchain product, Quorum, and particularly to do research on consensus protocols for Quorum. And it was after that I joined Dune Analytics, which is, is not strictly like a Web3 product, is more like an analytics platform for crypto data, for blockchain data. So I don't know, it wasn't really like a conscious decision, now I'm going to be a developer on Web3, I'm going to work on this. It kind of just happened. I was already working on this. In fact, we can trace it back again, like to more than 10 years ago, when I was doing my PhD research. It's just at some point people started calling it Web3, and here I am.
Yeah. As an engineer, and I'm sure you work with I don't know if all the engineers that you work with have been working in distributed systems or Web3 for a long time, or if some have made the jump from Web2 to Web3 recently or not. But do you have a sense of, as an engineer, as a developer, how are those two worlds different, and what is there a kind of a different mindset? Are there different challenges? Can you give us a glimpse of that?
Yeah, I suppose. So one thing that I see, I mean, like I do a lot of recruiting for Dune, so I end up interviewing a lot of candidates and talking to a lot of people and try to understand their motivations to getting into Web3 and to getting into Dune specifically. I mean, one of the most interesting things you see is that like there's a significant generation gap between people who are excited and want to get into Web3 and people who are the opposite or are not that interested. I mean, if I talk to most of my previous colleagues at Google, for instance, most of them, they're not even like fully aware of what's going on in this space. And to them, like crypto is still like this thing that's kind of esoteric in some way. So one is that generation gap for sure between people who are excited into Web3. But the other one, more technical and I guess more economic based, is that it's just a differently fundamental way of thinking about things and building things. And I feel like we're still scratching the surface, and there's still like a lot of trial and error experimentation here. with the blockchains, with DAOs, we have a fundamental different way of building things. The blockchain, essentially, in my view, is a this gets thrown around a lot, but I don't think it gets enough attention. Is a universal computer. It's a fundamentally new computing model that gives us different properties. Sure, it doesn't have the same performance characteristics as the cloud, but it gives you many interesting things and opens many novel ways of building stuff. So we're still scratching the surface there, and I believe we see a lot of innovation and a lot of new ways of building things, building systems, building products that are going to surface in the future.
I'm happy you mentioned two things that I agree are kind of critical here, which is it is a generational thing in a way, and it's also the vision of the global computer or the global computing platform is key, because it's, as you said, it's a different paradigm when you're thinking about developing applications and coding and so on. In a way, it reminds me a little bit, and I've known you for, I don't know how many years now, so you know what I'm talking about, like the beginnings of the internet and the beginnings of the web space and all that, which was very chaotic, and most people were completely unaware of what was happening, but there was clearly something happening that changed the world. And I think that's what we're seeing now again. It's a shift in paradigm and a shift in ways of doing things. Ian, I'm going to go to you now. So as someone recruiting for Protocol Labs, I'm sure I probably don't need to tell you that there's a bit of a war on talent going on in this space. We've already talked in a previous session that there aren't that many developers, Web3 developers, mainly when you're talking about languages like Solidity and kind of the core stuff of Web3. There aren't that many really good developers. So there's a huge war on talent. Can you share your perspective on that, and also whether there are some specific trends that you've been seeing on that front?
Yeah, 100%. So you are definitely right, Carlos, that there's a war on talent, and it's accelerating too. It's accelerating faster than I think anybody could have imagined with the amount of talent that's starting to become interested in this space. So I would say the main trend that I've seen really is that, whereas I worked at Facebook, sort of the figurehead Web2 company before shifting to Web3, and I'd say one of the main changes is that in Web2, it was a lot more about trying to find like the exact profile for a job that we had open. We have this position open, let's find the skill set and get someone in who can sort of work on that day one. There's exceptions to that, but for the most part, as a recruiter, that's what we were trying to do. Web3 is much more, because of your point, Carlos, that there aren't a lot of developers or a lot of talent in this space yet, about thinking about how to develop and train people into positions, which is a really refreshing change for me working in recruiting, actually thinking about someone's potential and someone's like aptitude to get up to speed on something, as opposed to just their skill set coming into a role. So that obviously opens up this whole new sort of way of applying for positions, about making yourself sort of appealing for a position to a recruiting team, because it's not all about having 10 years of Java experience. It's about what have you done to learn about this space, and what have you shown that can sort of indicate that you'll get up to speed very quickly. So I'd say that's one of the main trends I've seen. One of the other trends I've seen is that like companies have shifted to be a lot more global very, very quickly. And part of this was the pandemic as well, but there's a lot of companies in Web3, Protocol Labs included, that are completely decentralized. So we're spread across the entire world. And in a Web2 world, it was very much like, okay, you need to move to the Bay Area to make Bay Area money, or you need to move to New York to make New York money. And this was especially difficult for me because I'm located in the Midwest in Wisconsin here, so very different environment than Silicon Valley. But the thing that I really love about Web3 and another trend here is that now we can hire talent anywhere, and we pay the same regardless of where you are in the world. If you're in Silicon Valley, if you're in Wisconsin, if you're in Nigeria, if you're in Australia, you get the exact same pay for the exact same work that you're doing for us. And I think that's a really, really awesome trend, and like attracts more talent to this space, knowing that there's not like that implicit bias in the interview process that's going to sort of, you know, benefit others. Some people are, and not others, I should say. But hopefully that answered your question.
It did. You mentioned that part of your job now is to kind of to identify specific points that point you towards future potential of being a good developer or a good kind of candidate for a Web3 company. Can you share with us, like, what are you looking for when you're looking at more kind of Web2 oriented developers, and how do you kind of identify whether they will kind of jump to the Web3 space well? Can you give us some indication of that?
Yeah. So I'll start out by like Web2 specific things that we sort of look for, or a few indicators, and then I can talk maybe a little bit about some Web3 things that have people sort of dipping their toes in this space, hackathons being one of them. So great that we're here today. But in the Web2 space, we look for people who have operated in different industries and very fast-paced environments, first of all, because as Pedro and Henrique mentioned, like, this is incredibly fast-paced in Web3. Things are literally changing and evolving every single day. So being able to move and operate in that environment is super, super important. So it doesn't mean you have to have worked at a startup, but like showing something in your profile or your background that shows that you have that aptitude to like work and learn very quickly is super, super important. The second thing, which I sort of alluded to a little bit, was like being able to work in an asynchronous or completely remote environment. Like, I think a lot of people just sort of assume that everyone can do that now because of the pandemic, but especially in like a development environment, not everyone can do that. You know, a lot of people are used to going into an office prior to the pandemic and like working next to other engineers and collaborating with them. And it's definitely sort of a different beast to like be completely remote and having to sort of communicate with people across the globe in different time zones. Like, looking for some sort of indication of someone's aptitude to be able to do that is also super impressive, or super important, I should say. And then the third thing in Web2 backgrounds is we look for a multitude of technologies that someone has exposure to or aptitude with, as opposed to like one specific thing. And I say like technologies in general because we look for people who can get up to speed on different things quickly, because, you know, there's a lot of open source technologies, there's a lot of new technologies in this space. There's probably things being developed right now that I'm not even aware of that we could be using in 3 to 6 months. So like, we need people who can sort of jump in and be able to pick up those things very quickly. And then the last point that I'll make, Carlos, is just that we also look for people who have some sort of interest in Web3. Hackathons, participation in hackathons is great. Just sort of indicated research in this space, like self-directed research, whether it's just like, you know, I have an interest in blockchain or Web3, or I have an interest in this, as just sort of like a flag saying like, hey, like, I'm trying to maybe dip my toes in that space, as opposed to just like nothing like that. Because whereas there isn't a lot of talent in Web3 currently, there's 50 to 60 million engineers in Web2 or other traditional industries. Like, any sort of thing to sort of like put that flag up is super important from a recruiting perspective.
Thank you. That's great. That's exactly the kind of insight that I wanted to get from you. Pedro, going back to you. So we've had a lot of people chatting on this webinar about like, how should I start? Where do I go to for kind of resources and so on? So I think we can actually discuss that. So for people that are new to the space, how do you see kind of what are the best ways to orient themselves and find opportunities, and kind of where should they look at for resources, not only from a technical perspective, but also from kind of how do I find a job? You know, can you give us some insights into that?
Sure. So from a learning perspective first, I'm going to split the learning from the job searching one, if you don't mind. So learning perspective, for instance, what I did, I coded a little bit on Solidity as well when I was jumping into this world, you know. So, but I went on Coursera and those types of course, like, and now that I've been in the space for a little bit, my advice is different. So there's a lot of different cups of tea, depending on who you are. So for ladies, I advise Surge. There's others like Web3 baddies and other groups, but it's a sort of community. So if you're, I mean, it's not for extroverts, but if you have more of a community vibe, then Surge is a good one. I'll drop the link in a bit. If you are you have more, you're willing to go on hackathons or something like that, but you don't have the money, then there's Padawan DAO, which actually Talent Protocol, we're backers of their DAO, which supports people to go on hackathons. I think they supported several people to go on ETH Denver, which is happening right now. So that's a cool one. There's a bit more like broad ones, like the famous Rabbit Hole, and Odyssey DAO is doing some interesting things in this space. If you want to have approach, like you already know something, and this is a good take to go into searching a job, Gitcoin is a nice one to get paid to, to contribute to different projects or even submit yours and get a grant. And there's like on my list, I have a couple more, but I'll only say like Kernel. I really love Kernel. I'm part of Kernel. As a community, it's just, it's fucking amazing. Like people have very good vibes, and it reminds me of like a Web3 yoga station or something like that. It's really cool. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to learn. All right. And the more you go deeper, the more things you'll discover. So I bet Protocol Labs has their own program as well. So, there's actually, I should add it to this list, but I'll check that later. But when it comes to job searching, now this is where it comes like different approaches. And unfortunately, a lot of the job searching is still done in a Web2 manner in Web3. So job posts, apply. It's a Web2 approach, something we are, or that we can potentially revamp with Talent Protocol in the future, not for the time being, but something that we can potentially go there. So you have a lot of job boards, whether in these communities I just mentioned, but there's others that are blockchain focused. Okay, I'll drop a link or two afterwards about this. But for me, my favorite one, and taking into DAOs, which is, it's a fairly recent thing. It's been around for a while, but the same way Henrique was saying that Web3, it became Web3 for, actually I have a theory why it became Web3, but the DAOs is also like a bit of, there's a bit of exaggeration around DAOs, but it is indeed true that you can join projects or DAOs and do collect bounties, and when you collect bounties is through work, and eventually you can get invited into the leadership teams or the contributors to become more of a contributor. And I believe this is a more organic way to find a job in Web3, together with what I mentioned before about Gitcoin. So yeah, this is my answer. I'll drop some links in the chat so people can check things out.
In a way, what you're saying is the more you get involved and the more you start getting into the rabbit hole, the easier it becomes to find the jobs and find the things that you're looking for. For sure.
But if you want, you can still do it the traditional way, like job boards, this sort of thing. So that still exists. But I mean, it's not the most organic way.
Awesome. Henrique, again, back to you. So when you decided to kind of jump ship from JP Morgan and join Dune Analytics, I'm sure you you kind of looked at what was available and kind of made your decision. For someone that is coming into the Web3 space, how would you advise them in terms of kind of choosing where to go to and what companies or protocols or DAOs to join? Like how did you go about kind of evaluating your options and deciding on one? Is it different at all from kind of the typical Web2 way of doing it?
I think in general it is different. It was not different for me in particular, but I think, I mean, speaking generally, I think it's different. It's a different route. For me, it was more like I was actually, after JP Morgan, I was thinking of taking a sabbatical and use that time to contribute to some open source projects related to the blockchain. And while I was doing research, looking into tokens, into DAOs, into protocols, I stumbled upon Dune dashboard in one of the sites, and I clicked through, and then the rest is history. That's how I ended up in Dune Analytics. For me in particular, it was appealing because it was a perfect intersection between my experience on distributed database systems, on big companies and big data, and blockchain, and crypto. However, I think for most people who want to participate maybe on be Solidity developers, participate in creation of new protocols, tokens, DAOs, things like that, it's a different route. I think it's more about becoming involved in the communities, following Twitter, joining Discords, talking to people, see what's going on, and from there, many projects hire directly from Discord, for instance. So it is definitely a different route. It's much more about becoming. The first step is really becoming deeply involved in the crypto community. And from there, I think it's a natural step towards finding and identifying what works best for you. And here, I think your own personal values also play a role, about picking which project to choose. There's so many things to think about and think where you'd like to contribute to.
Awesome. Thank you for your perspective on this, Henrique. Ian, again to you. There's something that I would like to ask you. So you've already gave us the perspective from the recruitment point of view, like how do you recruit, like you're looking for trying to identify potential because you're not necessarily just kind of looking at the specific keywords because they're not there, and you have to kind of try to identify proxies for whether they will be successful in the Web3 space or not. But as an applicant, so let's say I'm now moving to the Web3 space and applying for positions. As an applicant, is it a different process? Like, what advice would you give to people that are applying to Web3 positions? Is the application playbook different, or is it more or less the same?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say it depends on the company. So, we have a traditional job board. You can go to our job board. You can apply for a role. But I think the thing that's most different about the application process is that it's not as easy to find the things that are going on in Web3 as it is in Web2, at least in my opinion. In Web2, it's very much like, I want to work for Facebook, I want to work for Google, I go to their website and I apply for whatever role I want to work for there. But in Web3, what I generally tell people is, figure out first, like, who in the space is interesting to you, or what projects in the space are interesting to you, and then start pulling on those threads to like figure out what companies or individuals are working on those things. Because Protocol Labs, like when I first heard from them, I had no idea that they were working on IPFS and Filecoin. And that's because Protocol Labs, like a lot of companies in Web3, they don't spend a lot of time on recruitment branding per se. It's more so just like focusing on the technology and the work and the community around that work. But for someone trying to make that jump from Web2 to Web3, it's not as easy or traditional to sort of figure out that information as it is with with other companies. So yeah, my point would be like, definitely figure out like what projects are interesting to you, who in the space, whether it's on Twitter or Discord, is like saying things that are interesting to you, and sort of keep pulling on those threads, see what communities they're involved in. Pedro mentioned a ton of great communities that you can be a part of to sort of start to learn about the space and like what companies are in the space operating in different ways. So yeah, that's how I'd say it's a little bit different as opposed to like just going to a job board and applying.
Thank you. So we have about kind of maybe 10 minutes more. I would like to give the opportunity to the attendants to ask questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to share them either on the Q&A or on the chat, and I'll put you up here. Otherwise, I'll move to my next questions. So any questions from the crowd? Okay, we have a question here. I'll probably just very briefly, we'll probably very briefly go through this one. So is it possible to share broadly what is Protocol Labs, IPFS, and Faber? So we covered that in most of the other sessions, but I'll just try to resume that very quickly. So Faber is a VC company based out of Portugal. No worries, you'll be able to see the recordings next week, but we're a VC firm based out of Portugal that invests in deep tech, early stage companies, mainly with 3 specific teams. So we tend to be specialized investors. 3 specific teams. One is AI data, and we have a team for that and advisors for that team. The other is Web3, again, specialized teams, specialized advisors. And the last one is climate tech, ocean tech, again, separate teams, separate advisors. So that's Faber in a nutshell. Ian, do you wanna kind of give the gist very briefly on Protocol Labs, IPFS, and Filecoin, by the way?
Yeah.
Very briefly, because we already covered that. So
yeah, so Protocol Labs, obviously Web3 company, very well known in the space. We actually have a lot of different things we're working on besides just IPFS, but IPFS specifically is basically just a file system, a protocol, peer-to-peer network for storing and sharing data in a distributed file system. And then we have Filecoin, the cryptocurrency that basically like incentivizes that distributed network. And I guess that's, I'll say for that, like leave it at that to have like a quick explanation. But I guess the way I would think about Protocol Labs as a whole is sort of like a Bell Labs of the 90s, where we're sort of like working on all these different technologies and research areas to like really drive forward, you know, a new version of the internet and humanity as a whole. So we have a lot of cool things we're working on here besides just IPFS and Filecoin. But again, I can, if you want to reach out to me after the call, I can dive into that a lot more.
That's fine. We'll update the Hackathon website as soon as we have the videos ready, and anyone can go there and check all the other sessions. That we go really deep into Filecoin, IPFS, and also Protocol Labs. Any more questions? No. Okay, just to close this and to wrap it up, I would ask each of you, and Ian, you can go first. If you had to give just the top 5 advice that you could give to, or top 3, top 5, something along those lines, top advice that you would give a Web2, be it developer, engineer, product guy, designer, kind of, because we're always talking about engineers and developers, but there's all sorts of people that are making the transition. So what are the top 5 pieces of advice that you would give someone that wants to kind of go to the Web3 space?
My top 20 pieces of advice for people.
That's a long list.
Yes, let's see if I can come up with 5 here. So the first one I would say is definitely start researching projects that you're interested in. So sort of what I alluded to earlier. So like start to learn about the space. What projects are exciting to you? You know, if it's IPFS or Filecoin or other things we're working on at Protocol Labs, that's great. But like start by researching the projects and figuring out what about this space is exciting to you. The second thing is I would start following or interacting with people in this space. I say following because I think of Twitter a lot. The Web3 community, the crypto community is very, very active on Twitter. So following the people that are exciting in this space to sort of start to learn about the space and be a part of the ecosystem and the environment. The third thing I'd say is like really start to like dip your toes into the space in different like basic ways. So like, I guess Pedro was posting a ton of links here. There was a link posted earlier about sort of a 101 in the blockchain space. Like YouTube is an incredible wealth of information to just like get up to speed on so many different technologies and companies. We post most of our engineering meetings and all hands on YouTube's. Like you can already pretend to be a part of Protocol Labs before even joining us by just participating a lot of what we have on YouTube. The fourth thing I would say is like, really just make sure from a technology skill set that you're trying out different things. That's another thing I alluded to earlier. So like if you have been stuck in Java for better or for worse for the last 10 to 15 years, like try experimenting with other technologies to like really round out your skill set. And then the fifth thing I would mention is specific to Protocol Labs. We do have a Launchpad program that we built out to accelerate talent from Web 2 into Web 3. It's a 6-week curriculum. I posted a link to it in the chat here, but if you are interested in sort of making that transition from Web 2 to Web 3 and getting paid to do it, we have a really cool curriculum to make that happen. As part of that process, we fly people somewhere in the world. There's a community building aspect of that. So the whole team's in Iceland right now, working on some bug fixing and other cool technology challenges. But yes, I'd check out that Launchpad too, or reach out to me if you want more information on that as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ian. Henrique, same thing. Top pieces of advice.
Okay, I only have 3. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
So, I mean, number one, of course, I think Ian mentioned this, is understanding the space. That should be the first step. This is a different world. And it's really important to, you know, get a good, deep understanding of the technologies involved and everything involved. You know, research blockchain technologies, read the papers. You know, don't content yourself with a cursory reading or a superficial understanding of things, and try to understand DeFi, DAOs, you know, tokens and the economics around tokens. All of that stuff is extremely important. And this is important in order to develop critical thinking. Critical thinking is always important to one's success, but here, because there's also so much noise, it's extremely important for you to be able to filter out the noise and be able to separate what's good, what's not good, what's important, what's not important. And number 2 is, you know, again, connect with the community. You know, join Discords, be active on Twitter, you know, see what's going on in space. The rate of innovation is so intense that even just by reading the papers, the time you finish reading a paper, it's probably already obsolete, or someone has come up with a new protocol, new ideas. So it's really important to get a pulse of the community to follow what's going on. And number 3 is essentially, you know, be creative. This is a space where everything is up for grabs. Many of things we take for granted, and many fundamental things can be rebuilt from scratch. We can do many new things in a fundamentally different way. And that's probably the top piece of advice, is that if you come into this space, just know that there will be plenty of room, plenty of opportunity to create something that is new, completely different, innovative, disruptive. And I think it's a big opportunity for everyone who wants to get into this space.
Thank you, Henrique. Pedro, same question. Top pieces of advice.
Sure, yeah. I only have a couple of them, to be honest. I mean, these guys already covered most of them.
Last guy to go is always tough.
Yeah, it's the toughest one. So a couple of them, be open to everything, really. It's really a brave new world, and that's fascinating. So fall in love with this concept and be okay with it. And the second thing is, take some time off every now and then, just to breathe, to relax, because it can be intense, especially as a founder. I feel this, but I think it goes to any contributor building in the space. Take some time off. It's okay. It's still early days. When you come back, a lot of things will change, but it's still early. So it's totally fine to take some time off. I think that's relevant to keep sanity. Otherwise, you can really fall down the rabbit hole, but in a negative way. So that's it.
Well, that was awesome. That was a great way to conclude and summarize what we discussed here today. I think we had an amazing panel. Thank you to the three of you for taking the time to spend it here with me and the participants in our hackathon. After this, so now we're going for a break. Afterwards, we're going to have a session on how to write a pitch for an accelerator. There's a context to that as well. So as I mentioned yesterday, we're not only doing this hackathon with Protocol Labs, but we're also going to be launching an accelerator, Falcon Accelerator, together with Protocol Labs. And some of the awards in this hackathon will give you an opportunity to be fast-tracked into the accelerator. So if you want to not only experiment and build a project for fun, but also potentially create a business out of it, the next session is definitely a must-watch. So thank you for now. We're going to go for a break, and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. We're now ready to go to the next talk. So we're going to be talking with Ruben from Protocol Labs, and he's going to give us some insights into how to create a great pitch for an accelerator. Hi, Ruben. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. How about you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Perfect.
Ruben, welcome. I appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. I'm not gonna waste anyone's time more by keep talking, so I'll pass on the floor to you.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to be set up quickly sharing my screen. How's everyone doing? Can I get some raised hands? Everyone doing well? Excellent. All right. So, Carlos, can you quickly confirm that the slideshow is displaying?
Yes, you can see it fine.
Cool. So today we're going to be talking about how to write a great pitch. And writing a great pitch is very much a skill you are going to need across your entrepreneurial journey. It is something that you will need when you want to enter a grant program, but also accelerators or doing fundraising. So essentially for everyone on your team, be it the developers or the business-facing roles, there are elements in this particular talk I'm going to be giving that are recurring and that are part of the kind of key skill set that you will need to develop as a founder. So with this, let's quickly do a round of kind of introduction of who I am and why I can speak with like a little bit of authority to this. So I myself was involved with a number of companies. I started out with Rocket Internet, which is one of the larger VCs in Europe. Carlos will know them from, I guess, a number of deals. I then joined a portfolio company, Delivery Hero, where I was involved in mergers and acquisitions, but also in just the deal from the rocket side. And then after that, I joined the venture arm of BCG, where we also did a lot of pitching when it came to kind of selling projects or even securing funding for our projects. And the last one being Pumpkin, which currently is at 100 million recurrent annual revenue, where we also did a significant amount of pitching to VCs and also huge veterinarian organizations. So pitching is something that is going to be with you throughout your journey. So let's kind of double click on what it means to deliver a great pitch, in particular in this kind of venture-backed setting, and look at the individual elements. To me, there are a number of ways of cutting it. There's a very famous methodology that cuts it into like viability, feasibility, desirability. I think for this particular group, where we have a lot of first-time founders, I'm going to double click a little bit deeper and like simplify it a little bit more so it becomes slightly more haptic. And I try to kind of formulate it from a entrepreneur's perspective, so not from a VC's perspective. So the key elements that you will need to run through, and I strongly suggest you do it in this order. There are other ways of doing it. And as you kind of improve on your skill set of crafting narratives, you can play around with these. But this is a kind of battle-tested approach. It's kind of like a very, very simple way of doing it. Right? So you start with the friction. You start with why people in the audience should even care about what you're doing. You then move into the solution. So you directly, once you have created this urgency around why what you're doing is important, you come up with a solution. And there are a couple of parts to the solution that your audience, in particular the VCs in the rooms, the investors, would want to hear. After that, your job is to increase the confidence in the audience that you can execute against the solution. And there are a couple of parts to it. The first part is to show how you execute, or how we as founders will execute against the solution. Then how what we build will create value. This touches on, your business case, your business model, how you address the different stakeholders. And then the last one, and often the most important one, and I know Carlos is very much kind of like a fan of this, is why are you the best team to deliver against this? But I'm going to break out all of these. Are there any questions in the audience at this point? Otherwise, I'm just gonna jump right into it. Cool. All right. So a couple of things on the friction and what it is that you are trying to do initially, right? Initially, you want to answer the question of why. Why should people care about what you're saying? And you should be very cognizant of your audience. Often, you're pitching to people like me or people like Lukas, who are confronted with hundreds of pitches on a weekly basis, right? So there's a little bit of a pessimistic spin on this, whereby I would say if you don't catch our attention in the first 15 to 30 seconds, it is going to be hard to get that attention back, right? So start strong, start from the user perspective, and start with the why. Why should we care? Why is this why is this a huge program? Why is this a huge problem that needs addressing? And why should I personally care? Be it from a monetary financial returns perspective, be it from maybe I'm an impact investor, and maybe this is very much aligned with the strategic vision of the fund I'm investing from. Make sure that your audience starts caring about the why. Right? And once you have done that, and you see the initial light in the eye of the audience, substantiate it, right? It's like a 1-2 punch. Yeah, you go in, you capture their attention, and then you actually substantiate and make sure that it doesn't just feel like an assumption. It feels like something that is actually grounded in data, right? So if you're talking about we should care about global warming, you could draft timelines, right? You could draft timelines as to why I should care. You should tell me what the reduction in carbon emission should be for me to care and for me to believe that your solution or your friction is something that I should care about. Lastly, drastically simplify, right? Don't overestimate the sophistication of your audience. And what I mean by that, and I'm right now in Denver, at ETH Denver, and again, yesterday I was at at an investors dinner, and there were a couple of really high-profile startups around. However, some of the pitches were way too technical and unnecessarily so. And often, someone from the team will come around, will drastically simplify, and then it will click. And remember, what you're trying to do is not convey to me how technically sophisticated your solution is, but what you really want to do is you want to bring the message across as to why I should care. So simplify as much as possible and test run the simplification with people, in your immediate circle that might not be as technical as you. If you can explain it in simple words to your grandma or someone from your college, and then you are on the right path. So much about friction. There are a couple of things that I would like to briefly highlight because I have experienced them too often, and I want to warn you of it. Currently, in particular in Web3, we're kind of in this paradigm where the technology enables us to do a lot of things that just weren't able before. We weren't able to do technologically before. This brings with it a temptation to just build something because it is possible. This is interesting, especially for engineers who are drawn to interesting problems. This might be a temptation, but I would warn you not to fall for that, right? Don't build something just because it's possible. Build something because there is a real friction. And that friction should have a number of qualities and characteristics, right? One, it should be real. So I spoke to this just now, like provide the data. Secondly, it should be sizable, right? So when you speak to your addressable market or when you speak to the people affected by this friction, yeah. So let's take Uber, right? There's a sizable number of people in the United States that want to get from A to B. Tell me how many people these are, right? And then show me that this friction that they're experiencing, hey, it's difficult to haul a car from downtown San Francisco to uptown San Francisco. Show me that this friction is recurring, right? It shouldn't be a one-off friction, maybe just related to this specific unicorn moment of COVID. No, I want this friction to be recurring in the next 5, 10, 20 years, depending on the longevity of my fund. I hope this makes sense. Any questions in the audience, particularly on friction? Carlos, can you monitor the chat for me, just in case?
I've been looking at the questions. I'll let you know if there's any. No worries.
Okay. All right. So let's take a step back and see where we are right now. Okay. So you have just entered the room. You have delivered a killer delivery around your friction. Carlos's eyes are now bulging. He totally gets why you're doing what you're doing. The friction is real. You have the audience on your side, and we are kind of now on this common journey of addressing this friction. Now you need to deliver a solution that I kind of.
Ruben, there's a couple of questions on friction actually.
Yes.
So could you please share some examples on friction and how we put that in 1 to 2 lines, perhaps from a few winning pitches?
From a few winning pitches. Okay. So, and let's take a Web3 example. There's one company that I personally really love, and they're called Heat. And basically what they are doing is they're an NFT play, and they're associated with Friends with Benefits and the Metaverse group within Friends with Benefits. And what they are doing is they are building in an expression layer across metaverses, right? So what they're doing is there are these like separate metaverse platforms. You know, you have VR chat, you have you have functional land, you have sandbox, and what they're doing is they are making it possible that you can have a motion capture, yeah, like maybe a dance or a certain expression, right, or a particular thing, right, and a particular emote that you can take from one metaverse experience to another metaverse experience, right? And the way they kind of substantiated that the friction is real is they ran a couple of surveys within, you know, as an example, the Bored Ape Yacht Club community, but also a community that I'm a part of, which is called Pool Suite. And they substantiated that, hey, we would actually like metaverse agnostic expressions that we could bring into these metaverse experiences to kind of identify or show each other our common identity as parts of this Bored Ape Yacht Club or Friends with Benefits community, right? So that would be a friction. So the friction would be, I am friction. I, as a metaverse user, am currently not able to take the emotes from one metaverse experience into another metaverse experience. This is a recurring friction that I'm experiencing, that I'm experiencing every day, and it's something that lives across metaverse experiences. So does that kind of answer that particular question? I sadly can only see the panelists, so I can't see if you are giving me like a thumbs up or not.
We got an excellent, thank you.
All right. Are there more questions on friction? I think it's super important. I think the friction part, if we spend 50% of our time on friction, then I'm happy. But yeah, is there maybe another question here? Cool. So yeah, feel free to also ask the questions later. I'll now move forward to solution. So again, Carlos's eyes are glowing. Now we move into the solution stage, and we are now kind of like shifting gears from talking about the macro into the micro, right? So now you are starting to talk about your particular business, right? And your business features a number of pieces. It features a product. It features kind of like a go-to-market and a strategy and a team, right? That's associated with it. However, before you go into the nitty-gritty, right, make sure that you are laying out two particular pieces and make sure they stick, right? The one thing that you want to do is you want to lay out the vision of where you want to go. Why is this important? So now in Carlos's mind, the friction is real. You want to create as big a image or a mental model of what your solution could be in 5 to 10 years, right? So I refer to this here, the vision, as the ultimate, largest end state version of what you are building, right? So that is one piece that you want to get across. Get across to the Carloses and the investors in the room how far this could go, because this is where the money is, right? Like venture capital by default is risk capital. A number of the companies will fail. You will want at least one blockbuster in your fund, and that blockbuster, the vision of this blockbuster, should be big enough to return the entire fund. Yeah. So as an example, put an example down here. You probably recognize what company this is associated with, but the vision here would have been to become the largest e-commerce platform on the planet, right? So that is a mission here. However, the mission is very far away, and it's helpful to talk about it. It's helpful to like instill that in the mind of the investor. However, you also need to talk about your mission, right? Like, what is it that you do to wake up every day, you as a team, right? An example of, again, Amazon, like the kind of the matching mission to the vision is to provide seamless direct-to-consumer experiences, right? On a daily basis, you cannot focus on becoming the largest e-commerce platform on the planet. That is not kind of a goal-directed piece that will that works as a heuristic to plan activity. Mission, however, is something you can get excited about every day. At Pumpkin, as an example, which is the pet insurance company that I built like 2 or 3 years ago, our mission was to allow caregivers to provide the best care for their pets, right? And this is something that, we're sitting in the office, we're looking each other in the eye as a management team, and we know that this is something that we're excited about, right? A classic case, very generic case of Web3, that you hear quite a lot, is like empower artists to be able, to own the value they're generating, right? Like a lot of NFT marketplaces are positioning themselves in that way. So that's their mission. Cool. So that's kind of like how you start speaking about your solution. Do we have questions in the audience? Cool. All right. So once you have kind of touched on what your solution is, you will now need to kind of shift gears into a more granular piece or into a more granular conversation on how you actually bring this mission and this vision to life, right? Rome was not built in a day, and in the VC's heads and in the heads of people like me, there's like a bullshit detector, right? And this bullshit detector is what you kind of try to disable, right? And we call this kind of like active de-risking. And we de-risk a couple of ways, right? And I'm going to go through these steps in a minute with you, but everything that is kind of following from here on out is to bolster the confidence of the audience in your ability to deliver on the vision you have positioned as your solution. I hope this makes sense. All right. So what you should start with after you spoke about your solution is to speak about how you will execute, how we as a founding team will execute against that solution. And there are two kind of industry standard ways and pieces that you would expect as part of the pitch that you would need to speak to, right? And one of them is kind of like an initial product roadmap, and I'm consciously saying initial product roadmap. And the second piece is the go-to-market, right? And let's unpack this a little bit. So when I say initial product roadmap, I am not referring to the piece that an application like Jira or Monday or any of these productivity and agile tools will generate for you, right? They produce these like very detailed sprint-based product roadmaps that have a really, really high grain of detail. No, this is not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about an initial product roadmap, I am talking about you honing in on what your product is after 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, right? Give an idea to your audience on how you will transition step by step into the vision that you have outlined against the solution. Yeah? And this is a very important piece. This is where you demonstrate to your audience that you have a plan. And what you are trying to do is you are trying to, from a product perspective, right, from what you are building, that you have a plan on how to get from A to Z while going A, B, C, D. And these individual steps, these individual kind of bite-sized pieces, today to 3 months, 3 months to 1 year, should be digestible, and they should be believable given the team that you have kind of budgeted against the effort. So I think what could be helpful is me, after this talk, maybe sanitizing a couple of roadmaps, like initial product roadmaps that I've seen, and providing you like a little bit of an idea of what I'm going for, because I don't want you to, and I'm laying this out here, provide unrealistic detail. And I think this is something that you should definitely stay away from, right? Like people get very skeptical if you have planned out a 5-year plan very narrowly. And I think it always comes different than you have planned. However, again, what you're trying here is to convey confidence in your ability to provide tactical steps towards your vision. So once you have done that initial product roadmap, that is product, right? You also want to double click on how you activate this, how you go to market, right? Like how you bring this product that you're building, left side, to the market and to the user, right? And this go to market is more of an is more art than it is a craft, right? So this touches on your execution ability. This touches on often how experienced you are. But what you want to demonstrate here is that you have a plan on how to acquire users and how to acquire users effectively. And in going to market, you will make a number of key decisions of where to start. What am I talking about here? Let's talk about HeatDAO again. I think this, the product I was just talking about with the emotes across metaverses. What we were facing in kind of like a board meeting yesterday was we were talking about a number of avenues for go-to-market. There are a number of ways we could go to market. We can do a marketplace, and we can advertise what we are doing directly to users. We can also go and do like a B2B2C play, whereby we acquire the metaverses, the individual metaverse kind of outlays, and have them then advertise the strategic partnership with us. Or we go via the communities, the Bored Ape Yacht clubs, et cetera, and work with them, and then use them as multipliers for our outreach. So these are kind of like the avenues that you have and the conversations that you have internally. And often it helps to kind of outline the individual choices that you have in like activating what you want to do. And then showing why you chose for one or two or all of them, or maybe, first this one, then a tiered approach, then you switch into this one. And then once this is built on a product roadmap, you're switching into number 3, right? So this go-to-market, this sequential piece on how you are going to conquer the world, right? That instills a lot of confidence if you can craft a narrative that Carlos and I and Lukas can follow. Does that make sense to this audience? I would love to get some questions on this.
Ruben, we do have a question.
Yeah.
So the question is, for the go-to-market, what is a good way to start? Focus on local markets or international also, if it works, and considering some geographies are still catching up on blockchain, NFTs, etc. And also, is it okay to mention that via the acceleration program, we expect to be able to unlock new markets and partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. So, maybe to the latter one, right? Like, so a geographic rollout can make a lot of sense. In particular, given that some teams will have idiosyncrasies. As an example, you might have an offering that is already quite established in the United States, and then you kind of have an offering that is de-risked on the business model piece, right? So you're looking into the United States, there's something that in the English market is already very established. And now you are a Spanish speaker or you are a Chinese speaker, and you're like, hey, I can take this from a business model perspective and I can culturally craft this to my particular culture, the culture that I know, the language room and the echo chambers that I know, the DAOs, etc., that I know in China or let's say in Brazil, and then go to market there, right? And this is something that we at Rocket Internet, as an example, have done to huge success, right? We have built many many billion-dollar companies, basically doing a geographic kind of arbitrage play. So that absolutely makes a lot of sense. So the classic pieces, just to take like a step back and think about approaches, like often you see a geographic go-to-market where people are say, hey, we start, on the East Coast, and then we move into the West Coast, and so on and so forth. Another approach would be to tackle different verticals. So saying, let's say you are a payroll provider, and then you say, hey, so we are going to be starting with B2B integrations with the huge benefit services like ADP and so on and so forth. And then later we move into direct consumer offerings and then roll out our mobile application, right? So, or you vertically move into like telecommunications, or you move into farming, right? Like whatever vertical makes sense, what you need to just give back to the audience is how you go about it. Did I address all pieces of this particular question? I think there was something around mentioning that you were part of an accelerator.
So yeah, part of the question was, is it okay to mention that via the acceleration program, we expect to be able to unlock new markets and partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely mention it. I think, as first-time founders in particular, it is a great kind of rite of passage, and it makes a lot of sense for you to communicate that you are part of an accelerator, and like feel free to put like Protocol Labs and the Faber name, next to it, and say, hey, I'm a proud alumni of this accelerator, and I took a lot, from the acceleration. So absolutely mention it. Yeah, absolutely. Quick time check. How much time do I have left?
You're good. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, cool. So the next piece is, 2 steps back. So now you have shown how you want to execute on the product side and on the business side with go-to-market and your product roadmap. Now, the next piece that, founders often neglect, and I find this very surprising, is what is your business model? How will whatever you are going to do provide value, right? And I do understand that there might be, elements in this audience that don't have a direct profit motive. So you might be building in the impact space, so your KPIs might be different. But you still want to provide value. And how you provide value, the value story, is something that you need to be able to communicate clearly. And the way of doing this, to me, the best way of doing it, I'm a visual thinker, but I can assure you that many of my peers will agree, is boxes and arrows. Go for boxes and arrows. And you want to do 2 pieces here. Yeah? You want to address 2 key questions. Number 1 is, your business will touch on a number of stakeholders, right? So let's say, to make it simple, maybe I provide a hard example, a Web3 example, and a simple Web2 example. Let's start with the simple Web2 example. Uber, right? They are stakeholders in the Uber ecosystem. They are drivers. They are people that are hailing rides. They are operators. They are, they are these, the operators that are basically kind of like a B2B function that manage multiple drivers, right? You potentially have seen it, that like whenever you hail an Uber, it says, this Uber rider is actually part of another company that is LLTD, right? Like another stakeholder, right? Like a function that is focused on basically collaborating with Uber to do rides, right? And then you have Uber themselves, right? When you come into these conversations, you should clearly have figured out what is in it for these individual stakeholders. You should be able, if I press you, so we go to the Q&A now, you're standing there presenting, and I'm asking you, why should I, as an Uber driver, participate in it, right? Your answer should be, I'll make it easy for you. I make the process of getting riders easy for you, and what is in it for you? Money, right? What's in it for Uber? Well, Uber takes a cut, right? Like, so these questions, like, that's basically a table. Find out who the stakeholders are in the process, do your research, and make sure you have a strong answer as to what is in it for them. Just assume that every stakeholder in this particular kind of mechanism is going to be extremely rational, right? And they might not be rational, later on, or you will find out that they might be slightly, differently incentivized, particularly when other ride-hailing companies like Lyft come in and there's competition, but you should have nailed the basics. Yeah, and it's very similar in Web3. Web3 is kind of like, at least to me, it's kind of like the masterclass of incentive design, right? You need to create, like, foundationally Bitcoin, but also, the Filecoin economy, Ethereum, they are systems that have mastered how incentives are distributed across different stakeholders. The validators or the miners, the people that are participating and submitting their submissions, and even the retrieval miners in the Filecoin ecosystem, the people that are participating in DeFi, and storage providers, and so on and so forth, right? Like, what Juan and their team have built, in essence, is a working incentive mechanism that in itself satisfies the needs of the individual stakeholders. Cool. So once you have kind of solved for the stakeholder mapping, and solved what is in it for me, for every stakeholder, you also want to just provide a really, really simple flowchart of how it works, right? Don't assume that at this point, we in the audience have got it, right? Like, make it extremely easy for us to get it, right? So as in Airbnb, you can go to a website. On the website, you can filter for a home, and so on and so forth. Make it easy. Boxes and arrows show who is getting what, when, why. I can't stress this enough, and I'm always surprised when I get a presentation that doesn't feature this. I hope I landed this right now, but this flowchart, I very much like to see. In particular, you have to assume that the person you are speaking with from a VC perspective, the people in the room, are not the ultimate audience. Often, they will take your pitch away, they'll take it and they go to someone else, and then they will have to relay your message to someone else. And having a flowchart like that will help them remember what it is that you're building, and will help them communicate what it is that you're building. And they can then do your work for you in pitching it to maybe the principal that has the ultimate investment decision, or maybe other people in the syndicate that they want to also invest into your company. Other questions in the audience? Excellent. Nikki, no questions? Cool. Boxes and arrows, guys. Boxes and arrows. Powerful. Cool. Then lastly, on team. So I would always recommend you to close on team. At the end of the day, you might at this point be, your audience might at this point be in a state whereby, they have their bullshit detector. They think, hey, what you're doing is interesting, but actually, if I were to go about it, I would do it slightly differently. I think the product roadmap is slightly unrealistic, and the budgets are not quite right. And the go-to-market is, I would start on the West Coast and not on the East Coast, or I would build it on Polygon and not on Ethereum, or whatnot, right? The team slide can flip it. The team slide can make sure that what is a decision on the fence becomes, a buy-in or a buyout. Don't underestimate the power of, introducing your team, because VCs know, investors know, and protocols know that it will come different, and there will be pivots and iterations to your product. The question is, do you have the right team to deal with the uncertainty that comes with it? Do you have the right experience there? Are there experienced founders, right? Do you have the exact skill sets that are needed? And the way we kind of think about it is like this. And this is what I would like you to take away. Not as much the individual kind of pieces of the Venn diagram, but the idea of your audience thinking about you like a Venn diagram that has to cover a certain problem space. What do I mean by that, right? When we look at a team and you have instilled within us a vision of what you want to build and how you want to do it, we are now matching this to the skills that we are seeing in this room. You have given us a plan, you have given us a fight that we, a journey that we can like depart on together. Now I'm looking at you and I'm like, do I pick you as the team I want to go on this journey with? Right? And there are a number of things I obviously want to have covered, right? If you talk to me about, hey, I want to build this DAO tooling stack that, integrates with, 50 applications within 3 months, and we have the best engineering team. I want to see this reflected. I want to see this reflected on your team slide. I want to see that you have shipped in the past. I want to see the velocities, the teams, the people that you have built alongside with. And I want to see that this engineering activity is somehow managed on the product side. So ideally, I'm seeing a strong product manager that can point to a portfolio of product that he or she has built. So I will have the confidence that I can trust, that I can trust that you will ship, right? And then obviously there will always need to be someone who handles the business piece, from recruiting to having an office that is still needed, to payroll, to fundraising. All of this, you want to have covered. So the way we think about it here is really, there will always be spikes in teams, right? Some teams are extremely technical and they're missing a bit of the business knowledge. Some teams are very strong on product, maybe slightly weaker on engineering, another spike in business, etc. I think what we are looking for is no glaring holes as it matches to the plan that you have outlined for us. And that is, that would be a strong detector. Like in an accelerator setting, as an example, when you pitch to us and then, Lukas and Carlos and I, we kind of step away and we think internally, often the conversation is, oh man, I love what they're doing, but I'm not sure they are the right team to execute against it. So use this team slide to really show, where have you been in the past? How have the experiences that you had in the past shaped you to be able to deliver on, the product or business side? Why are you the right designer to do this? So, put all the logos on there, tell your story, and shield your team, and also shield your team of advisors when you're really early stage.
Ruben, can I interrupt you very quickly, because we have a question and it's an interesting question. So the question is, how do we address this if it's a solo founder?
Yeah, okay. So that is that's actually a fascinating piece. I think within the VC community, there was a huge stigma around solo founders a couple of years ago. I think this has changed. I think this really has changed. In the Web3 world, we have seen a number of really successful solo founders. And I think what you want to do from a pitch perspective is you want to at least, so you want to show that you can build a team around you, right? So solo founders does not mean solo builder, right? So founder is somewhat of a technical term, right? Like you're saying, okay, I have taken an outside risk. So I am someone who is entitled to a certain share of equity. Hence, I'm calling myself a founder, and everyone else who comes after me is basically L1, part of the management team or early employee or whatnot. And what you want to show is what is your routes to coverage, right? Like, do you have a strong product manager in mind, right? You can, so on the team slide is not necessarily just limited to the founding team, right? Talk about the third parties that you are employing to help you with building, right? If any, right? Like maybe you have a design agency, maybe you have, I don't know, but show how you cover what needs to be done. I don't advise against being a solo founder. I guess I advise against going all the way to your vision state alone. I think personally that's not as much fun. I personally very much think, and you can see it on my Twitter profile, that building software with friends is one of the coolest things that you can do. Like, get great people involved. You don't know what you don't know. People like your team will teach you stuff, not just on a business level, but also on a personal level. So craft the story of how you will hire people, where you will hire people, and how you will kind of complement the team. I don't think there's any one person that really has that type of personality where they are stellar engineer, also product, also business, and has more than 24 hours in the day to deliver against all of that. That's just a recipe for burnout.
I would just, I agree with that. I would just add to that by default, I tend not to invest in solo founders because of some of the things that you mentioned, but also building a startup is a marathon, and having the people around you that you can talk to openly and will support you during that marathon and pick you up when you fall down. That's really important. It's not just the skill sets and it's just the time, it's also the support. There are exceptions and there are some amazing solo founders, but I would surround myself with people that I trust and that I love to work with. We have another question. So in Web3, the most notable projects do not seem to have a business team. How do you convince the audience that eventually the engineers with the community will figure out the business part? And the follow-up question to that is, what was Bitcoin's business team?
Yeah, that is very interesting. So I don't know about the internals of the Bitcoin business team. I think Bitcoin is, I can geek out about this, Faber, but Bitcoin is a very kind of particular case. Like, you can look at it as a case study, as like the archetype of the store of value blockchain. I personally meddle more in the dApp space, and the dApp space nearly always has some sort of at least strategic partnership or user acquisition component that ideally you outsource to a business function. You can, like, don't get me wrong, you can do it yourself. Like, just like Carlos said, you can do it yourself, but you have to appreciate, using Carlos's words, that you have to do it yourself forever, right? Because we are building these protocols, these like slot machines, to be around for a really, really long time. And I don't think you're necessarily setting yourself up for success here. However, there's also a different story whereby, you are the creator, you're an engineer, you're a developer, you are creating, an offering, and you are starting to build out your engineering team. And naturally, what you often see is that, the founder that has initially been coding a lot and been developing a lot, then more and more takes on managerial roles and kind of slowly graduates into a more management businessy type role, just because he or she ultimately becomes more and more of a decision maker and less of an individual contributor. And how do you instill trust that this person can grow into this? I think the best thing is past experience. So if we see that, you know, you have started out as like a stellar senior engineer or just an engineer, graduated towards stellar engineer, became a product manager or even like an engineering manager, head of engineering type, obviously we, you know, at a great shop, let's say you've been at Apple or Google or wherever, and obviously, or at Balancer, MakerDAO, whatever, obviously this instills a lot of confidence in us that, you know, while as you are right now a solo founder and you have kind of not regressed, but you're back now on the individual contributor level, you can then, you know, grow back into this kind of managerial business role. But still, you know, like even interacting with us as investors, right? Like we want stakeholder management, right? We want you to own your cap table. These are kind of businessy type functions. And the question is, do you want to assume this opportunity cost, right? Do you get the best return of investment, always swapping, you know, mentally between writing excellent code here, then doing a bit of stakeholder management, then doing a bit of like payroll issues and like dealing with lawyers and jurisdiction? Do you want that, right? And I think, you know, nobody in this room can build a pencil. Nobody can build a pencil. A pencil is the sum of coordinated efforts of people. Do not underestimate the power of coordination and focus on building a great team. Don't focus on how can I stay solo. I think that's, to me at least, and I agree with Carlos, that's not a winning formula. Cool. More questions?
I think we're running a little bit over time, so I think we'll move on. And if there are any questions at the end, we can probably pass them on to you, and you can answer asynchronously. Sounds good? Excellent.
Thank you. Hey guys, it was a pleasure being here with you. Feel free to find me on Twitter. Feel free to find me on the PL Slack. And yeah, it's been my pleasure. Always fun geeking out about stuff.
Ruben, it was a huge pleasure on our part as well to have you here. That was super insightful. I was just kind of looking around to see if there was any camera in the room that I'm in, because you seem to be seeing what I was reacting to your presentation to that. but it was a really good presentation. I think it expressed my views better than I could. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So now we're moving to our final session. Unfortunately, we're about to close. It's been another amazing day. So for our final session, we're going to be talking about a more kind of high-level view of the Web3 space and opportunities. And I'll pass the baton to Lukas to go ahead with his talk.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And I'm looking at the questions, so just kind of keep them coming. I'll have an eye on it. I'll try, although like once I start sharing my screen, it'll probably be hard to see it. I just see the one here, where do we pitch and submit? We'll talk about that like right after my session. So the answer is like you'll find all that information on the website, but we'll talk about it at the very end. Cool. Let me start with the final session. So I want to talk to you guys about Web3 vision and opportunities. And I loved the question from Alex on right. But what's the business team of Bitcoin? Like, what does it look like, right? Like, we're not talking about like cookie cutter kind of approach to business building. Web3 is different. And I want to kind of talk to you about that. My name is Lukas. I'm part of the ecosystem growth team at Protocol Labs, so driving the adoption of IPFS and Filecoin. And hackathons, the one that we're kind of like in the middle of kicking off today with Faber, are an important vehicle for us to seed ecosystem growth. And so I'm super excited to welcome you guys and kind of wrap this session to today. Cool. Let me start. I'm gonna just jump right in. I think like historically, the success of any commercial venture has really rested on access to one or a set of proprietary resources and the reliance on some openly accessible infrastructure. Taken together, these two things have allowed companies to build differentiated, services and defensible products. And what do I mean? So, for example, on the resources side, there could be things like raw materials, relationships, access to a production or financial capital, or more recently, kind of a piece of code or user data. And on the infrastructure side, it's things like roads, education, or more recently, shared internet protocols like IMAP, HTTP, and SMTP. These protocols have created a lot of value, right? Like by facilitating the exchange of information via email on IMAP or just on HTTP in browsers, they have created these like huge businesses. Facebook, all of them couldn't be like thinkable without these protocols. However, as we've all seen kind of over the past few years, the vast majority of the value that was captured through that was only done through the creation of applications that implemented a given protocol. So the protocol, like the people that developed the protocol itself, didn't really have a way to capture the value. The developers often, right, and this is kind of the equation, like value creation does not necessarily equal that you're able to capture value. And that's particularly true for public goods, right, where the consumption is non-rivalrous and non-exclusive. Actually, many of the shared protocols that we use today continue to be maintained by volunteers and open source communities. And I don't know if you saw this, went through the news a couple of weeks back, like a major flaw in some code, and suddenly the whole infrastructure crumbled that was built on top of it. What people kind of learned, because there was not really a mechanism to capture value at the protocol layer in kind of Web 2, is that investors learned that investing in applications, so Google, Uber, Facebook, things that like implement a given protocol and build products and business models on top of it, produced high returns. But investing directly in protocol technologies generally produced low returns or no returns. And so that slowed innovation at the protocol layer for a few decades, and it created room for centralized entities to emerge and capture value. And interestingly, like what many of these Web 2 applications have in common is their ability to leverage proprietary assets to really corner the market and solidify a dominant position that often feels monopolistic. And often enough, that proprietary asset is user data. And as you all know, the most successful business models in Web 2 are advertising. And what's interesting is, as these like advertising companies grow and as we kind of creep up that like growth curve, the relationship with network participants. So on the one side, like the users, but also the developers, creators, and businesses that actually create value and make this network more useful, has to change from a world where everybody shares in the value that is created to something that looks a lot less balanced, right? So at the beginning, you attract a lot of users. Facebook tried to attract a lot of people to sign up to Facebook. And then over time, it began to exploit them, right? It started kind of serving them ads and all of that. And same with the developers, creators, and businesses. Think about like something like Instagram. At the beginning, everybody, please come, like here's a cool way to grow your platform. But then over time, it becomes more competitive. And how is this even possible, right? Like, why don't people leave? Well, at some point, as these platforms grow, users cannot move to another platform or vendor without substantial cost or inconvenience, right? So you can't just leave Facebook because then you don't have access to the social network that it is anymore. And that's what we call the lock-in effect. And at this time, the platform owners achieve commercial success by exploiting data from users, selling it to advertisers, and competing with developers, content creators, and other businesses over audiences and profits. And there's this great quote, I think, from Chris Dixon, who's a VC in Web3, who said, Web2 platforms depend entirely on creators for content, right? Instagram without its users is useless, but it only gives scraps back. This is not sustainable. Web2's take rate is Web3's opportunity. So when you think about YouTube and the ads that play before the video starts, 50% of that goes to YouTube, 50% goes of that goes to the person that actually created the video. With Facebook, it's 100%, right? So often one centralized entity is able to capture most of the revenue generated. And frequently it's even 100%, where they don't share any revenue with creators. And they can do that because there's a lock-in effect, and they have very little incentive to aim for an outcome that looks reasonably fair to all parties. With the introduction of blockchain, this really stands to change. As you all know, blockchains references kind of previous transactions and states of the world in an immutable chain of blocks that is decentralized and maintained by everyone together. These states document the status of who is who owns what, and who has the right to do what. What they also allow for is the introduction of cryptographically secure tokens that can regulate access to a given protocol and allow protocol developers to monetize it, right? Those are the Ethereum tokens, the Filecoin tokens, and all of the other coins out there. With that, Web3 protocols not only facilitate the exchange of information, but also that of value. And that's a huge change. And because blockchains are open source, decentralized, or many of them are open source, decentralized, and permissionless, suddenly greed, so things like taking a take rate of 100%, brings risks to those that are greedy, because network participants may take the code and fork the network if a protocol developer begins to engage in what looks or feels like exploitative behavior to a large part of the community. So suddenly what happens is that the risk-adjusted utility for protocol developers is highest if you look for an outcome that is reasonably fair to all involved parties, or even better when you work towards a state where decision-making is decentralized and the community defines the appropriate take rates. So the ability to capture value, what I just kind of outlined at the protocol layer, now creates powerful incentives to innovate at that protocol layer. And while there continue to be plenty of opportunities, and Ruben talked about this also around like dApps, at the application layer, the market cap, I believe, of the protocol will likely always increase at a faster rate. Because like the success of the application layer drives further speculation at the protocol layer. Cool. So that's Web3 value capture happens at the protocol layer, and you change mechanisms on how you can create value, or you augment the opportunities of where to create value. I want to kind of begin to wrap it up a little bit. I think what helps me sort through the vast range of opportunities in this space is a little bit of a mental model, and I'm going to kind of walk you through this. And maybe this is particular to the Filecoin kind of universe, but I think it's pretty applicable across the board. So starting at the bottom, just here kind of on the hardware networking layer, you have kind of the foundation of the blockchain computer, right? Like, so you have the protocols on top, consensus and compute, that run and verify transactions, and then you have smart contracts who bring logic to the kind of transactions. So think of triggering certain transactions if certain conditions are met, and then finally on top you have user and client interfaces that turn these like very complex technologies into products and services that are easy to use for end users. The periphery, so kind of the top here and the bottom, are the sections of the stack where the business models tend to be most similar, I would say, to traditional business models. They're crypto adjacent, but they kind of seek to maximize revenue through other traditional means. So for example, on the hardware networking layer, if you know how to build a hard drive really well, or because you have a huge factory that produces hard drives, you can leverage economies of scale and scope. And then the business model that you have here is just selling hard drives or improving data center technology. At the core, so like the smart contract compute consensus section, things get a little bit more wild and kind of interesting. There is still a ton of opportunities here to create and kind of like capture value. But you're relying more kind of like on network effects there in terms of like how you defend it. One really cool thing that I think people are doing in the smart contract space, especially with the Filecoin virtual machine coming later this year, is data DAOs, where a community forms around a body of data that they care about. For example, I don't know, genetic data. And in such a model, members might be able to leverage the data only if they can prove that they have actually contributed to the data set, and then whatever value is created and captured by kind of tokenizing that data is shared back to the actual creators. So yeah, there's like Web3, right? So it has very traditional business models where you just charge transaction fees or something like that, although you will likely see lower take rates than you do in Web2. And then you have the very community-driven models where you have the ability to share back some of the value that is captured via tokens or other ways of kind of value transfer that are unique to Web3. And that creates a whole new range of opportunities to monetize and build successful businesses. I want to leave you with this like thought, like whatever you build, right? And Ruben talked about this a little bit, like the feasibility, can it be built by this team? Is it viable? So can it fund future growth? Is it desirable? Does it address a real fraction and solve a real problem? And will people use it? All of this should be like thought of in the context of Web3 against the backdrop of community, right? So what's super important for all of these, because you cannot exploit users, because otherwise they will leave, they will fork the network, is that you have to have community buy-in, and that is super important in Web3. So that's why we, as Protocol Labs and the Filecoin and the IPFS community, we're doing hackathons because we love engaging with folks and like hoping that they will start getting excited a bit about our technology. But it truly is existential, right? Like this is a key part for us to help grow the community, because even if we have a super great, we have a feasible product, a viable product, a desirable product like IPFS and Filecoin are, if we cannot get the community to buy into these technologies, then this will fail. And that is, I think, the key difference in Web3, where you have you have competitive dynamics, of course, and that still exists, but it has a much stronger emphasis on cooperation and community and coming together and like growing the pie collectively rather than kind of like stealing share. And that is also why this space is such an interesting and inspiring world for me to be in, because like my past career was very much focused on these competitive dynamics and stealing share. And now I'm working in a space where we're collectively working to create this groundswell and like collectively lift up the community and build economies that create value. And I very much would welcome if you guys all become part of that. So let me sum up with some kind of key takeaways here, just to kind of like run through it super quickly. So in Web3, value capture is possible still, and it spurs innovation at the protocol layer, not just the application layer. with that blockchain technology, especially if it's open and permissionless, you actually suddenly have the power to undermine centralized incumbents that are engaging in business practices that see these very greedy take rates. You will likely not see that in Web3, but it won't be to the detriment of creators. So this take rate really is the opportunity for Web3. So just go around, right? If you're looking for opportunities, which businesses in Web2 have high take rates, and look at those and see if there is an opportunity here for Web3 to go in. That can literally be anything, right? Like, can be ticketing, it can be social media, it can be the metaverse as ultimately an application or a manifestation of social media. There is a lot of opportunity to disrupt these businesses that have very high take rates and build something that is community first. And because community is so important, you need to be able to unlock these network effects, right? Like, make sure that one part of the community is very closely interlocked with the success of another, and that they collectively work to kind of turn it into a flywheel where everybody's working to make everybody else more successful. At the same time, if you're coming from a more kind of conventional background and you have a very straightforward idea, there's still opportunities to just, monetize transactions or build more conventional business models. I think, like, I'm hoping, that's why I joined the space, that with Web3, we might end this creep of advertising into every domain of public life. And maybe move beyond surveillance capitalism into something that feels a lot more human and doesn't feel as exploitative. So it's really a future with rich opportunity, and I really encourage you to kind of join in on the journey. And I think that's the end of my side. I'll hand it over back to Carlos to maybe give one more quick rundown of the timeline, because let me pause there for a second and actually take some questions. I'll stop sharing so I can pull up some of the questions that I see. And let's see, how do you evaluate the growth potential of a community-owned protocol? I think it comes down to friction, right? So I would look at, like, does this protocol unlock utility? So for the case of Filecoin, I believe there is tremendous opportunity because it solves the problem. It commoditizes cloud storage. So I think that's super important. I think ultimately, let me actually show you one slide that I really like in this. That kind of talks about, like, what do you need to look for? And I hit it in the slide. There we go. 1 second. Yeah, there it is. Share screen. When you look at, like, how a community gets started, this, like, flywheel is something that I find super interesting. So you start at the top, right? Like, a founding team has, and maybe a small community has a vision for a protocol, and that vision they convey. They say, we want to create a token that creates this type of utility, either to monetize a certain data set, or to commoditize cloud storage, or whatever it may be, or in the case of Bitcoin, to facilitate transactions across the planet in a decentralized way. That idea, that vision, attracts investors who might add financial capital and say, hey, like, this Bitcoin idea, that's actually pretty smart. Like, I'm bought into that as an idea. And then with that, you kind of bootstrap yourself kind of into existence, right? Like, with that demand, the value of the token increases. And then miners or other validators add production capital, right? So people add compute power to the Bitcoin network and say, hey, like, I'm gonna, like, try to get some of those block rewards because I believe in this token value, and with that, like, with adding that production capital, you're now adding platform functionality, right? So the Bitcoin network now has more nodes that are validating transactions, and it becomes more reliable. That functionality then attracts third-party developers, right, who are adding their time and their effort to actually create useful applications, wallets, and build this ecosystem of growth. And as you have that, now suddenly lots of people have wallets, and this Bitcoin thing works better and better. You're suddenly increasing the utility to end users who are using this technology, who then become part of a community that further kind of spurs this idea of, this is a great idea, and add kind of more momentum to the vision and the protocol, which then, the cycle starts over, attracts more financial capital, which drives up the token value, which increases platform functionality, and so forth. And you suddenly have this self-reinforcing wheel. So when I look at, I think it's an excellent question. When I look at why do you, how do you evaluate the growth? I look at does it have this potential to get this flywheel started? And community, once again, is the most important part of this. So make sure that when you're building a product, you're actually looking at a community that is thriving, that is excited, that is welcoming, because otherwise you're probably kind of betting on the wrong horse. Is conducting a hackathon a go-to-market strategy? I think it's the beginning of your journey. Ruben highlighted how you can think about go-to-market, right? You can cut it by geography. You can cut it by certain target user groups that you're going for. You can also outline what features you want to start with first in your roadmap. I think a hackathon is a great way to, is a part of that. I think it can unlock different things for you. You can learn from it. You can connect with other builders. You can start building your community. And you can grow and turn this into, right, you have an idea and you say, we participate in this hackathon and we won it. That was the beginning of our journey. And we had some first, winning the prize was the first validation that there's potential here. So it's not a go-to-market strategy, but it's a part of it. And I'm glad you're here. And I hope you make that the part of the beginning of your go-to-market strategy. Cool. Where do we pitch and submit? Yeah, cool. So Carlos, I'll hand it over to you to maybe wrap up the event. Thank you all for being here. And I'll let you maybe walk through the timeline one more time and maybe highlight all those prizes that we're putting out. I think that's certainly good. If you want, I can pull it up on my screen if you don't have it.
I have it here as well. Okay. No worries. So thank you, Lukas. Thanks for the presentation. That was super exciting and super interesting. And I think it gave an outstanding kind of high level overview of the opportunities in the Web3 space. Now kind of to wrap it up, I'm just gonna very quickly revisit our timeline. So we've now kind of launched the hackathon. The submissions are still open until the 21st of February. If you want to register for the hackathon, you can register up to the 21st of February on our website. So the website is Faber web3.devpost.com. We're going to share it here on the chat as well, the link. So you can register there and you can start submitting projects from the 21st of February till March 18th. We'll then kind of do a two-step analysis of the project. So we and Protocol Labs will be kind of going through all of the projects and selecting the top 10, and those top 10 will be presented to our jury, who will select the winners. And the winners will kind of be winning. So the prizes and the award structure is the following. So we're going to have like 3 grand winners, first, second, and third prize. We also have 3 awards for the business track, which means that if you're thinking of your project not only as a learning experience or an experiment, but you really want to think about bringing it to market, you can apply to the business award, and for that you have to also send over a one-pager kind of with an overview of what you're doing, why is it relevant, the beginnings of the go-to-market strategy, the team, just to give us an overview of the business opportunity, and you'll be eligible for three business awards on top of the other awards as well. So this is cumulative. As part of that business award, you will also have the opportunity to be fast-tracked into the Filecoin Faber accelerator. That's something that we will be announcing more details very shortly in the coming weeks, but that will happen between mid-April and mid-July. So it's going to be a 3-month program, again, together with Protocol Labs. And then to make sure that you take chances and you're bold in terms of your projects and you go all the way to the end. We also have a pool of 15,000 euros in Filecoin to be distributed among all participants that submit a valid project. So it's been an amazing 2 days. We had some really extraordinary talks. We had some fantastic speakers. I couldn't be more excited with what happened over the last day and a half, 2 days. Now it's on to all of our participants to get out there and start building your projects. We'll be on this side kind of looking at what you build. We'll also be available both on the DevPost side, but mainly on the Discord server to answer any questions you have and to support you both from the logistical perspective and the technical perspective. We hope you have a good experience during the hackathon, and I hope you have some fantastic projects for us to see at the end. We'll make all of the sessions available during next week. So this is all being recorded, and we'll make all of these sessions available next week for you to kind of rewatch and watch the ones that you might have missed. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone that participated. Thank you for all the panelists and speakers. And we have a question here. So you can register individually, and then on the DevPost site, you can mention when you're submitting, you can mention who belongs to your team, but everyone has to register individually. I don't know if there's any other questions before we wrap up. No? Okay, fantastic. We'll be available also. I'll stay on GatherTown, so I'll post the link for GatherTown here. We're going to have another kind of virtual beer hour, so I'll be available. If there's any other questions, feel free to reach out. I'll be around. Also, you can ask any other questions on Discord. Thank you very much. This was super exciting. Hope to see some fantastic projects coming out of this hackathon. Thank you very much.